Hi everyone. Good to see you on my channel today. Today I will tell you a wonderful story. It is full of love and kindness. I hope you enjoy it and I wish you an enjoyable viewing experience. Thank you.
At the table, which clearly showed traces of a recent tea party, two dressed-up ladies sat opposite each other. The mistress of the house, putting her manicured hands to her heart and rolling her eyes, complained to her friend. "Yes, Anna, this is how strange life is. I never thought that my son would bring such a simple girl to meet. I'm surprised he even saw that Fiona. He went to see her off like a well-bred gentleman so she wouldn't be blown away by a gust of wind. And now I'm worried how he's going to get home." She had been friends with Anna since time immemorial when they still lived in a large communal apartment. Catherine, along with her grandparents, got there as a result of not the most pleasant circumstances, about which and did not want to remember even after more than half a century. It was Anna, who was 5 years older, then took the patronage of the confused girl, for whom the rules of the communal apartment were some incredible wilderness. As a child, this age difference seemed enormous. When the communal apartment was dispersed, the friends did not lose touch and, living in the same neighborhood, continued to help each other. And today, on such an important day, Anna seemed to have dropped in by chance, which was the order of the day for them, and did not arouse any suspicion. Of course, in fact, the friend came specifically to support Catherine, but everything turned out differently. She chatted sweetly with Fiona, who had been introduced to her, and was clearly happy for John, whom she had been nursing since he was in diapers and considered almost her son too. Catherine had been mistaken in thinking that Anna would share her point of view. The friend, exaggeratedly official tone, well-practiced voice said, "Congratulations, Catherine. And you a real mother-in-law," woke up. Guest, ironically smiling, outlined in the air silhouette in the form of a guitar, then patted her gods and continued, "Fiona is quite pretty. Indeed, except that she is very thin. But this, as we know, is correctable, and in the truest sense of the word. You and I, if you remember, were also thin and reigning, and then we built up such armor that now our figures are safely hidden and inaccessible to the prying eyes." The women, whose figures were indeed far removed from the model parameters, looked at each other without collusion, remembering the past, and burst out laughing. When the gust of merriment died away, the hostess returned to the subject of discussing the impending mésalliance. "All the same, Anna, you see for yourself where he is and where she is. There are two great differences. Fiona has only the charm of youth, and nothing more. She's not as intellectually gifted as my John. Anna, do you know, while we were alone in the kitchen, I asked her what her dream was, and do you know what she told me?" The interlocutor raised an eyebrow, showing her interest, and asked briefly, "And about what?" "A big family. She said that she dreams of having at least 2 children. Can you imagine such a thing? Yes, in today's times would be one to raise. It's crazy." To Catherine's surprise, her friend did not share her opinion and began to softly object, defending Fiona. "No, Catherine, you're wrong on her. To me, she seemed quite adequate, sweet, modest, well-mannered. And what a craftswoman. Blouse, which I took for a boutique thing. It turns out she sewed herself. And the homemade sweets she brought to the table, just the highest pilotage. Fiona's hands are golden. You won't have to worry about John. He'll always be well-fed and well-dressed. You can't deny it. I mean, what's the matter with a girl wanting children? As one will give birth, so maybe, and will change his mind to continue." Catherine pressed her lips. She was dissatisfied and acquaintance with her son's fiancée, and what turned her conversation with her friend. Fiona was indeed not a bad girl. This additionally angered the mother, who wanted only the best for her child. Fiona, not intending to arouse pity, sparingly told her that she had been orphaned at an early age, and then her younger brother had been raised by an older sister. Of course, the family hardly lived well, so the lack of higher education was justified. But at the same time, Fiona was not at all shallow and easily maintained a conversation about theater performances and the novelties of the book market. Obviously, the orphan children were very friendly and tried to engage in cultural development. Anna, as if clearly hearing her friend's thoughts, made another argument. It is probably because of the selfless act of her older sister Fiona and dreams of a large family. After all, a huge thing, the support of close people. You know, Catherine, I think you should take this girl without hesitation. Of course, you can first get acquainted with her sister and brother, but I'm more than sure that they are also wonderful people, each other for the mountain, and this is worth a lot. There was silence in the room again. The women thought about the vicissitudes of life, and at the same time John, who went to see the girl home, reassured his beloved. Trust me, everything went fine. Mom, of course, was a little tense, but it's quite normal. But Aunt Anna sure liked you. You can rest assured that she'll be able to influence my mom in the right way, to open her eyes to how wonderful you are. Honestly, you should not worry about your mom. She is only strict in appearance, and in any case, her opinion is not decisive. All I want is to be with you, so that's what I'll do. John returned home in a great mood and was just happy that his mother and Aunt Anna did not make him a showdown and dissuade him from marrying Fiona. However, the main battle for a man's freedom was still ahead. Catherine, as a shallow woman, decided to act not on the strength and cunning. Soon enough, she had a heart-to-heart conversation with her grown-up son. Son, I have nothing against Fiona. She's nice and cute, but she's as simple as 3 pennies. She'll drag you into the Bordeaux swamp, diapers, Raspashanki, and all that stuff. You don't even have to guess to find out how things will work out between you and Fiona. She'll start having babies, and you'll have to work so hard you won't see the light of day. Of course, you'll do your best, but do you really want to work forever? Fiona's not a bad girl, which is why you shouldn't ruin her life with this wedding too. I know you well. You've been like that since childhood. You'll get an idea. You'll do anything to achieve it. And once the goal is achieved, it becomes unnecessary. It happened many times, with a bicycle, with a skateboard, or remember, you wanted to go scuba diving. How many times did you end up diving? 2 times, I think, right? John tried to object. Mom, that's not the same thing. Mom, that's not the same thing. One thing, childhood hobbies, and quite another now. Catherine shook her head negatively. Oh, son, you are now in love, almost blinded. Even the obvious things you have to explain. You will not last long in the monotony of life. Divorce with Fiona as a matter of course. It's good if you don't have kids, or you'll have to pay child support, and that could make it harder to build a new relationship in the future. Trust me, I know what I'm talking about. Leave Fiona alone, and she'll find her own real, quiet happiness. You have a whole other destiny. Find yourself another girl, more ambitious, a little more daring, so that together in this life to dig in and win back everything you can. But the man wouldn't give up. I don't need any other girl. Disputes arose regularly, but despite the attempts and tricks of his mother, John still married Fiona. Catherine put up with her daughter-in-law, who turned out to be very wise for her age. Fiona was not going to bend to the opinion of a new relative, but behaved so tactfully that for a few months, while the mortgage was being processed and she and John lived in his mother's apartment, even managed to please the strict mother-in-law. The young woman passed by the ears-thin stilettos in her address and showed herself as an ideal hostess. The firstborn son, who was born a year after the wedding, even more reconciled mother-in-law and daughter-in-law. Catherine, visiting her grandson Oliver, always surprised that Fiona and food cooked, and the house is in order. The woman understood. A great merit in this belongs to her daughter-in-law and her closest relatives. The fact is that John and his wife had taken out a mortgage, and even with her mother's help, the option available to them was, of course, far from ideal. The apartment required repairs and not only cosmetic. Despite this, the daughter-in-law did not complain or whine. Asking for help from her sister and brother, she organized the repair. With jokes and jokes, Alice and her husband, Michael, and Fiona herself, entrusting the care of tiny Oliver, mother-in-law, renovated the apartment, and for part of the work involved the team, which shortly before that worked in the apartment of her older sister. Catherine admired the friendship of this trio. She was pleased to observe the warm relationship between sisters and brother, and all doubts about Fiona were in the past. The young woman indeed turned out to be a wonderful mother and wife. Catherine was inclined to agree with her friend's opinion. Anna had been more astute than herself and had accurately noted that Fiona would be the perfect caretaker for John. 2 years after the firstborn, the family had a second boy named Justin. The change in family composition had little effect on the house, except that there were even more children's things. Fiona still managed to do everything, and Catherine, remembering her attempts to break up her son with his fiancée, was very glad that her persuasions were useless. Her mother-in-law thought that her son and his wife would stop childbearing, but Fiona and John had their own opinions on the matter. Right after Oliver's first day of school, her daughter-in-law, who had gotten excited at the lineup from the touching songs, went into rapid labor. Fiona was miraculously, or rather, thanks to the skill of the driver of the ambulance that came to the emergency call, managed to get to the maternity hospital. Almost in the corridor of a familiar institution, a woman gave birth to her third son. Kevin's birth coincided with a crisis in the firm where his mother worked before maternity, and Fiona simply had nowhere to go. John was happy about it. "That's fine, stay home with the kids. I make enough money, and the boys will be looked after, and you won't have to work too hard. It'll be good for everyone." However, following the advice of her older sister Alice, Fiona sought not to close on the household and tried to engage in part-time work at home. Of course, with 4 men, counting her husband, there was a lot to do. The woman tried to feed them in tasty and nourishing and varied, but in addition, as soon as the children grew up, began to actively involve them in helping around the house. It became much easier after the second son went to school, and the woman was able to build a new daily routine, which included both routine chores and fun with favorite boys. Mother-in-law, seeing what harmony reigns in the family of her son, did not cease to admire the tireless daughter-in-law. She tried to help Fiona with the children as much as she could and adored her grandchildren with all her soul. The more time passed, the more talents were discovered in her daughter-in-law, and Catherine was glad that her son had once been stubborn. Kevin was 4 years old, and Fiona had even gotten used to her status as a housewife. In addition, Anna regularly asked her best friend's daughter-in-law to sew or alter something and always pay fairly for the work, and then even began to send her not capricious and generous clients. The woman was engaged in children home, contributed to the family budget, and was happy. Except that John, as if thinking that Fiona with 3 boys now from him nowhere will not go anywhere, began to behave far from being a model family man. The man started staying late at work. On weekends, more and more often began to go somewhere, explaining his absences by industrial necessity. If the woman thought of something bad, she immediately tried to banish sad thoughts so as not to cause trouble. It seemed to Fiona that no force could separate her from John, but she was mistaken. In honor of her berry jubilee, Alice was going to organize a holiday at the cottage, with kebabs, overnight stays, and trips to a small river, which was a few kilometers from the site. The woman called and asking her sister to turn on the speakerphone, invited all her family to a grand party, relentlessly describing to them all the advantages of vacationing in nature. The weather forecast will be hot and precipitation is not expected, so you can set up tents right on the site to sleep there, because we cannot install air conditioning. It's a little stuffy in the house, to be honest. Jacob promised that he and his fiancée would be here on Thursday, but we're not celebrating without you. It didn't take much persuasion. Fiona and all her men were glad to meet their family and get some fresh air away from the stuffy city. The boys were very enthusiastic about the idea. They adored her family, and when they learned that Uncle Jacob would be attending the party, they were literally counting the hours until they left. At a brief family meeting, they decided to leave Friday evening as soon as John got home from work, especially since the man had nothing to do for the weekend and planned to spend time with his family and his wife's relatives. John took a very active part in the grocery shopping and gave Fiona an impressive amount of money to buy a gift. However, on the long-awaited day, returning from work, the man shocked his wife with the sudden news. "I think I ate something not quite fresh at lunch in the cafe. Something makes me feel sick, and I have to go to the toilet. I'm afraid it's going to get worse. I think I better lie down." Fiona was worried and hurried to find a suitable remedy. The mother of many children had a home first aid kit that could compete with the equivalent in the paramedic's office. So the woman immediately brought her husband, who had settled down on the sofa, a first aid remedy. Handing John a pill and a glass of warm water, Fiona clarified, Do you want us to stay here too? Wait until you feel better. We'll be on the road tomorrow morning. I'll explain everything to Alice. I'm sure she'll understand. John shook his head weakly. Why make such sacrifices? The boys have been looking forward to this trip. Go without me. You'll have fun watching me run to the bathroom. No, you guys have fun. Have fun. As soon as I get some rest and feel better, I'll be there. Or you can bring me something from there, if my ailment lingers. Fiona looked at the boys, who were already looking forward to a fun weekend, and agreed to her husband's plan, taking his promise that if he got worse, he wouldn't be a hero and would call for medical help. Remember that the boys and I love you very much. Don't be sad with Alice. The man was so weak that he did not even walk the family to the door and only waved to the sons. After standing in the usual Friday traffic at the exit from the city, Fiona confidently drove the car to her sister's dacha. Alice was very happy to have guests, although she was a little sad that her brother-in-law was ill. And the celebration began. Jacob's kebabs were excellent, and his fiancée also joined in. The toasts were accompanied by a delicious chilled croissant, which was a welcome relief after a hot summer's day. The children were having fun, united in a multi-voice pa mala. They were secretly playing mischief or playing hide-and-seek in the grounds, and only occasionally came to the table for refreshment or to quench their thirst. Everything was going just fine, but Fiona was uneasy. In the middle of the feast, her sister approached her. Fiona, why are you beating yourself up? Pack up and go to your husband. Don't worry about the boys. The children get along well with each other, and I think they will be happy to stay here without you. You can see they like it here. Go and soothe your soul. Fiona explained to her sons that their father needed her help now and she needed to leave. It was in vain that she was worried that the children would beg to go home. On the contrary, Oliver himself offered to stay at the cottage and promised to look after the younger brothers. The woman didn't want to drive after drinking crucian and called a cab. It wasn't economical, but it was even more wasteful to risk it. Fiona kissed her family and hurried to the car. The highway to the city was clear and the cab was soon on its way. Fiona didn't want to disturb her husband, so she opened the door with her own key, and for a second she froze in surprise. There was a stranger's woman's shoes in the hallway. Fiona was frightened that her husband had become so ill after all that he had called the paramedics on her advice. But there was no ambulance at the entrance, and it was unlikely that a doctor, even one called from a private clinic, would take his shoes off in a patient's apartment. Suddenly, Fiona felt sick. It suddenly dawned on her that her husband's indisposition was just an excuse to stay at home. The soft music and a woman's voice coming from the bedroom confirmed that John had lied to her. Her first inclination was to run out of the apartment, but Fiona decided to follow the bitter path of a betrayed wife to the very end. The woman jerked open the half-open bedroom door. Fiona watched the frank scene for a few seconds and then suddenly began to applaud. The mistress, startled, cried out and turned around. The devoted wife recognized her as her husband's colleague. They had seen her several times, during corporate parties and once during a chance meeting at the mall. Fiona couldn't remember her name now, but her memory told her how she'd smiled sweetly and lusciously when John had first introduced her to her. Fiona thought about the situation absent-mindedly, as if her head was trying to protect her from a terrible pain. So most likely this ugly scene wasn't even an episode, but a multi-part story in which I'm assigned the role of an unaware knave fool. John, noticing his wife in the doorway, literally pushed the confused mistress out of the way and turned to his lawful wedded wife. Fiona, you've got it all wrong. The woman was even confused in response to such an insolent statement of her husband, and then clearly under the influence of adrenaline, found the strength to joke. Of course. I understand that you found an innovative cure for poisoning. It's got a lot of merit. I think it should be patented. Okay, John, I'll meet you in the kitchen. Can your date find her way out of the apartment on her own? Fiona turned around and went to the kitchen, which was also desecrated by her husband and his visitor. On the table were a bowl of fruit, sparkling wine, and 2 glasses. It was these 2 glasses, decorated with exquisite engraving with wishes of happiness, that her and John had been presented with at their wedding by her younger brother. Now there was lipstick on the rim of one of them. The woman felt disgusted to be in her own kitchen. Not only had her husband brought another woman into the house, but without thinking about the depth of his meanness, he was also serving his passion drinks from the commemorative flutes. With disgust, Fiona looked at the marks of her husband's betrayal. She was so disgusted by his behavior that she simply bent the edges of the almost new tablecloth, tied them in a huge knot, and then threw them to the floor. The flutes and other dishes that had been on the table a moment ago clinked pitifully. The oilcloth material was supposed to protect the floor from the possibility of leaks, but Fiona cared less. She heard the door slam. It sounded like her husband's mistress had left the apartment. The world focused down to John's face, who seconds later walked into the kitchen and stood across from the woman. As if nothing had happened, John inquired, "Where are the children?" The indignant woman very much wanted to answer pro-family, but she restrained herself and asked her husband, imitating his intonation, "Where is your conscience?" Not only had he obviously lied about being sick, but he brought a strange woman into the house to have fun while I was away with the boys. John didn't even make excuses, but went on the offensive, making the woman feel guilty. If husbands didn't lie, most happy families would have broken up a long time ago. Besides, I'm sorry to be blunt, but you look like a horse that's been driven. You're always rustling around like an electric car. I'm looking for a new experience, a flight of emotions. You had to show up. Are you checking up on me? Fiona felt that a few more minutes and she would not be able to keep her emotions under control, so she tried to get him out as quickly as possible. "All right, John, if you've said all you want to say, then goodbye. I interrupted your flight by accident. I had no intention of distrusting you or testing you. I thought you were suffering here, but it turns out you're having an emotional flight. Go, maybe you'll catch up with your mistress and fly, but not in our apartment." The man gritted his teeth, but knowing his wife for 13 years of married life, decided not to develop a scandal and leave the apartment. The door slammed again. Fiona mentally noted that the sound was much quieter than after the departure of her husband's mistress. There were no tears, though resentment stung her heart and demanded action. Fiona felt that there was no way to erase the memories, so the linens would suffer the same fate as the tablecloths and dishes in the kitchen. She dragged the two bundles to the street dumpsters and returned home. Just at that moment, Alice's phone call rang. She was worried that Fiona hadn't let her know how she'd gotten there. The woman, devoted to her husband, tried to make her voice sound quite cheerful, and on the next question answered that John was feeling much better. This, however, could not at all be called a lie. As long as the woman hadn't come home at a bad hour, he'd been doing just fine. Fiona decided not to upset her sister with the news of the collapse of her family life, reasoning that it was better to let the fun at the cottage continue. Asking how her sons were behaving, she didn't even listen to her sister very carefully and hurried to say goodbye. Fiona went to bed in the children's room, glad that they had recently refurbished the furniture and bought a large, comfortable bed for her older son, Sina, who had grown dramatically. The next morning, she planned to return to her sister's dacha and, tired of worrying, fell asleep instantly. Awakened by the early dawn, Fiona had time to put as much of her husband's things as she could into 2 travel suitcases. It wasn't too hard, especially since she didn't even try to fold the clothes neatly, but it did tire her mentally. The woman brewed and drank coffee, but before she could get ready, her plans had to be adjusted because of the trill of the intercom. Mother-in-law, to whom John obviously had time to tell about the mishap with his wife, who had not returned in time, came to visit from the morning to try to save the collapsed family of her son. Although Catherine had her own key to the apartment just in case, she did not open the door, but delicately called from downstairs. Fiona assumed that her husband would try to send his mother to her with a peacekeeping mission and already regretted that she had not gone last night to her sister's dacha. However, it was foolish to hide. The woman opened the door to her mother-in-law, and Catherine almost immediately, as soon as she sat down on the chair offered to her in the kitchen and refused coffee, went on the offensive. "Fiona, you can probably guess why I came to see you. I'm sorry about John. A man made a mistake. That's just the way they are. I caught my husband in the act too. John was just a kid, a little older than Kevin is now. His father begged me to keep the family together for the sake of the baby. But I'm a proud woman. I didn't listen to any of his advice and got divorced. And you know, I still regret it. A boy needs a father, or a grandfather in case of emergency. You know, a good male role model. Oliver's gonna be a year or two away from puberty. Justin and Kevin adore their dad, and I know you still love John. Forgive him, if only for the boy's sake. It'll just take a little bit of time to get over it. Don't break up the family, please. Fiona did not want to prolong the unpleasant conversation, and she not too politely interrupted her mother-in-law. Ekaterina, tell me, John, probably near the entrance in the car waiting for you? Mother-in-law smiled happily, thinking that her little honorable mission succeeded and daughter-in-law is ready to make peace with the traitor, so hurriedly nodded. Of course, he wanted to come first to talk, honestly and frankly, but I talked him out of it. I wanted to prepare you in some way. Fiona nodded, as if she had foreseen this turn of events, and told her mother-in-law, "Call him, let him come up." Catherine quickly dialed her son's number, and in a few minutes the women heard the key turn in the door. John walked into the kitchen, where his mother-in-law and sister-in-law were sitting, and asked, "That's all, Mom, thank you. If you could leave us alone. Next, I want to talk to my wife alone." Catherine encouragingly winked at her daughter-in-law and sideways out of the kitchen, saying that she would leave the keys to this car on the shelf, so that if necessary John could go with his wife to the holiday to Alice, and slammed the door behind her. However, the woman could not have guessed what would follow. John turned on the kettle, then walked to the stove, put a frying pan on the fire, poured in butter, and took eggs out of the refrigerator. Breaking them into a cup as if nothing had happened, he asked, "You want eggs to cook?" The woman shook her head silently. She did not imagine the communication with her husband, who just a few hours ago caught with another in their apartment. She thought he'd make excuses, but John had shown remarkable composure. There was no fidgeting or nervousness in his demeanor. His movements were precise and measured, and soon he sat down calmly opposite his wife and began to devour the scrambled eggs. The man didn't seem at all embarrassed that Fiona kept her eyes on him. As John began his tea, the woman said to her husband, "I'm not going to beat around the bush. You can talk to the kids anytime you want, but I can't live with you anymore. Part of your things put in suitcases, take and get out. I'll file for divorce after the weekend. I think you're a sensible man and won't drag out the process." Fiona's words came as a complete surprise to John. The man had expected a completely different result, and before his wife's eyes, there was a surprising metamorphosis. He turned from a calm man into an insolent man who turned to snide insults. "Oh, I can't tell you how tender she is. She can't live with me anymore. You can't live without me. You at least think for a minute. You are now 35 years old, in the hands of 3 sons. No one will need you with kids. You'll grow old, and when they leave home, you'll be alone. That's if they don't kick you out of your own apartment. So it's in your best interest to take me back. It's not gonna be easy raising the boys on your own, so peace." After saying that, Fiona had no doubt that her married life with John was over. It was a shame for herself and for her sons, whom her husband had predicted would become scoundrels in the future. The woman gritted her teeth. "Get out." John realized that in his desire to hurt his wife crossed a very important boundary, but apologize was not going to. "Oh, you've ruined my appetite. Okay, if you want to stay divorced with kids, you're strong. You can handle it. I'm out at here. I'll pick up the rest of my stuff next weekend, so stay home." Fiona just smirked. "Don't worry, I don't want anyone else. Come on in, or I might have left out a pair of socks. Besides, don't forget that you have children." The man turned and left the apartment. Fiona had a great desire to make a mess of the apartment she had so lovingly organized, but the only thing that stopped her was the thought of having to rebuild it herself. The woman was unable to stay alone. She hurriedly called a cab to go to her sister's dacha. Alice, barely a glance at the returning Fiona, realized that something strange had happened, and calling her sister aside so that their conversations would not be heard by the other guests, asked, "What? John's not feeling well at all? Was he hospitalized? Why don't you say something, Fiona? Tell me what happened." Fiona did not make up anything and honestly told about the recent events in the family. Alice hugged her sister and advised her not to make a hasty decision. "It's up to you, but I think John deserves a second chance. Whatever you decide, I'll be on your side and support you. The boys probably don't need to hear anything right now. Wait, maybe over the weekend you'll change your mind and try to rebuild your family. However, even if not, they'll at least have a few more happy days. Her sister's recommendation was not without a rational grain, and Fiona did not spoil her son's vacation. John never once called or tried to talk to his wife again, for he had a lot on his mind without trying to reconcile with his wife. Immediately after the failed reconciliation with Fiona, the enraged man brought the suitcases home to his mother and said, "I couldn't get that bitch to go away, so let her come running when she's in trouble. She'll be on my feet to make me come back sooner. Well, I'm going. I need to go for a walk, get some air." Catherine did not remind her son that she many years ago advised not to spoil Fiona's life and give up the idea of marrying her. She was offended that John himself ruined the family, which, thanks to the efforts of his daughter-in-law, was almost perfect. Before she could argue to her son that Fiona was not a megastar, but only a victim of his stubbornness, and that it was his betrayal that had caused the quarrel, the man kicked the suitcases against the wall, as if he were taking out his anger on them, and left. Unhappy thoughts seized the woman. The sad story of her life repeated itself in the female fate of her daughter-in-law. Catherine felt sorry for Fiona, and especially for her grandchildren. Having gone through the same ordeal many years ago with her husband, John's father, the woman was well aware that in a Sunday dad format, her son wouldn't be able to devote as much attention to the boys. She tried to figure out what she had missed in raising John since he was able to tear the family apart so easily. The woman was so happy that her gloomy prediction about the breakup with Fiona did not come true, but it turned out in vain. All day, Catherine thought about how to persuade her son and daughter-in-law not to breed fever. She did not know how to talk sense into her son and felt unauthorized to pressure Fiona. The day flew by, and in the evening the woman was in for another shock. John came staggering into the apartment in the company of an obviously not too sober lady and introduced his mother's companion. "Guinea, this is my mother, Catherine, the best in the world, I can tell you that." The man hiccuped and continued, "Mom, this is my Guinea. We're going to stay here for a while, okay?" In vain, John thought that his mother would accept his betrayal of his wife calmly. Catherine, who herself had been through such an ordeal, unexpectedly sided with Fiona, who he betrayed. "Son, I'm not going to lie that I'm pleased to meet the woman because of whom you insulted your lawful wife. I'm only letting you into my apartment for one night, and that's only because it's dangerous to walk the streets like that. I don't want anything to happen to you, but you know I'm not gonna let you turn my apartment into a mess." John's companion didn't seem the least bit embarrassed by the reception. Waiting until the man had gone to the bathroom, she smiled broadly and said, "I wasn't too keen on meeting you today either. I'm not in the right shape today, you know. I was so confused that I didn't even think to bring flowers. Please forgive me and understand. And in general, so that there was no ambiguity between us, I will explain. I have long loved your son, and I dare to assure you that I have the most serious intentions. I am convinced that after they divorce, I will marry him. So whether you like it or not, we're going to have to communicate. You and I both want John to be happy, don't we?" It is not known what would have said in response to the impudent guest Catherine, because the man who returned to the ladies dragged his mistress to his former nursery on the way to inform the indignant mother that they will not have dinner tonight. In the settlement of the family crisis in the life of her son, Catherine tried to connect her wise friend. Explaining the situation to Anna, the woman asked her to at least talk to John because she hoped that her son would listen to her. However, the man, as soon as his mother's friend began to lecture him on the need to value family, abruptly interrupted the conversation and did not stand on ceremony. "Aunt Anna, I have always respected you. What's more, I almost consider you my kin, and I didn't expect you to meddle in your own business, especially since you're trying to persuade the wrong person. It would be easier for me to stay with Fiona, but she's stubborn." John even chuckled, realizing the ambiguity of the phrase, and then continued in earnest, "I hope you will not burden me with this topic again. Goodbye." Seeing that his mother was reacting negatively to Ginny, John left his things in his parents' apartment and went on a wild bender with his mistress. The son and his sassy companion occasionally still came to Catherine's apartment to spend the night, not having found or not wanting to look for a suitable long-term rental housing. The behavior of a smashing couple, which, not at all embarrassed by the elderly woman, indulged in entertainment, greatly upset her. Her mother dreamed that John would come to his senses and return to his lawful wife. But the days flew by, and the man seemed to have forgotten about the family. At the request of her friend, Anna decided to go the other way, to influence Fiona. The elderly woman repeated almost the same thing that told her daughter-in-law Catherine, but the positive result did not achieve. Fiona, tired of everything that was happening, simply asked, "Anna, I hear from all sides that my boys need a father. I realize that myself. But how do I get over myself?" Anna did not know how to answer this question. Thanking Fiona for her time and leaving gifts for the boys, she left, hugging the strong and proud woman. Fiona was very worried, not knowing how to break the news to her sons that she was going to divorce their father. All week, feeling ashamed of her lies, she told the boys that Dad was just on a business trip, but it was impossible to lie to the children all the time. John suddenly took over the problem. The next weekend, after hugging the boys, who missed him very much, he sat them all down on the couch in front of him, sat down in front of them in Turkish, and began to explain that there would soon be a change in their family. "I am parting with your mother and will live with Grandma Katia for the time being, but I will come to visit you, and we will play and have fun on weekends as before." Fiona, who had slumped into a nearby chair at the beginning of the conversation, had tears in her eyes when she saw how upset her children were. Her heart was ready to shake, and she almost ran up to John to tell him she was ready to try a fresh start. But the man continued his heartfelt speech, and the woman was numb with loathing. "I'll introduce you guys to Jenny. She's great. She used to go camping, and she knows her way around a computer game. You'll have fun with her." Fiona was ready to howl in pain and resentment, but her eldest son had avenged her. Oliver got up from the couch and took Justin's hand in his, who in turn took Kevin's. Oliver threw his father a dismissive nod. "We're most interesting with Mom." The boys, clinging to each other, left the room and went to the nursery. Fiona listened to John's reproaches through the veil of tears that still came to her eyes. "Have you managed to turn your sons against me? Are you happy now? I didn't even know you'd go this way. They'll be more interested in you." The woman had neither strength nor desire to justify herself, and she just quietly asked, "Check if you've got all your things, take them and go away. I don't want to see you." However, the man was in no hurry. He, in the break between work and entertainment with his mistress, found out that the main problem could be a mortgage apartment and reported almost already ex-wife. "You'll have to see me anyway. Of course, I said a lot of things offensive, but it's just on the nerves. Besides, first of all, I don't renounce my children. Secondly, we have to go to the bank together to settle the apartment issue. And thirdly, you can't just throw away all these years together. You'll always remain my nearest and dearest person. Actually, I've been doing some calculations on how much mortgage we have to pay. I think maybe we won't have to sell the apartment and get a smaller one. I guess we could get out of it. If you don't mind, we could meet at the bank tomorrow lunchtime." John's completely rational and unemotional approach discouraged Fiona, who was horrified at the thought that she and the children might be in danger of moving. Oliver and Justin go to a wonderful school with a strong teaching staff. Not only that, but Kevin's kindergarten is very close by and there is no need to mess with transportation or depend on the vagaries of the weather. It was enough to leave the house and in a few minutes you could be in the right place. Thoughts whirled through Fiona's head and even her tears dried up. She needed to pull herself together and fight for the right to keep the apartment. If she went on principle and demanded to divide the property through the court, the result could be unpredictable, so the woman agreed to John's proposal. Everything went so routinely that Fiona even had a hope that the upcoming divorce proceedings will not affect the usual routine, because what to say most of the time with the boys she was engaged in. And John has long been approaching the role of Sunday father. The divorcing couple informed the bank, where they took out a mortgage, about the significant changes in their lives, and a nice girl consultant explained in detail all the options for resolving the situation. On the way home, Fiona thought aloofly that this bank employee sees family dramas like hers on a daily basis, and in her case, the solution was not the most difficult. Thanks to the impressive amount of money John had brought with him, there were only a few payments to be made, and everything had been arranged so that the apartment would go to her and the children after the final payment. Only a few formalities remained to be settled. Still, the generosity of the man she had once loved so much gave Fiona faith that they would be able to remain in a normal relationship, even after they were divorced. It seemed to the woman that with the collapse of the marriage, her life was not yet over. By mutual agreement with John, she did not file for alimony, receiving in return a promise to pay her sons a fixed amount each month, plus help in emergencies. Catherine was proud of her son, who, when divorced, behaved, unlike his father, decently and supported Fiona, assuring that he would always support his grandchildren. It seemed that the participants of the family drama could be happy, but such a favorable resolution of the situation did not suit one single woman. The money stream from John gradually began to chalk up. For the first few months, he fulfilled his promises with more than enough, but then on one pretext or another, he began to reduce the amount. Although Fiona was not lavish and got a job in an atelier, as she was now short of money with her sons. Fortunately, her grandmother did not forget about the children, and Alice and Michael constantly tried to help. The children had somehow grown up overnight, and even the youngest son began to treat purchases more wisely. Kevin now walked calmly past the cookery shop, where he loved to go almost daily for tasty puff pastries, and reasoned, Mom's baking is 100 times better. Fiona practically stopped using the car, so as not to spend on gasoline and maintenance. In addition, the car was registered to John, and one not the most beautiful day, a man simply told her that the term of the MTPL policy is coming to an end, and in a new document he decided not to enter her. I thought, you've got nowhere to go. Everything is nearby, so the car would be idle, and I'd have to take public transportation or beg my mom for a car. Fiona did not even argue, and realizing that the man is not even going to meet with the children, just handed her ex-husband the set of the car. All the same, the car now for her has become an unacceptable luxury. The boys, who missed their father, saw him less and less often. Usually they talked to him on the phone, but gradually the length of the calls decreased. Fiona noticed that about 6 months after she divorced John, the children almost stopped asking about him. Her eldest son tried to take on the role of head of the household altogether. Oliver started walking the neighbor's dog and brought the small amount the old lady had rewarded him with to his mother. Fiona, of course, tried to return the money to the neighbor, but she refused flatly. Baby, Oliver's growing up to be a real man. He worked hard for you. He helped me out and earned that money by his own labor, and you're hurting him. Listen to me and buy everyone something nice. Fiona left with nothing, but she asked Oliver to consult with her before he got involved in any projects. The woman suspected that the real reason her ex-husband's income had dwindled was the influence of the separated woman, and she was not wrong. Shortly after they divorced, John married Jeannie, who had managed to go from mistress to lawful wife. The woman immediately after the marriage said to her now legal husband that it is silly to wander around in rented corners if he has a share in his mother's apartment. You're a fool, John. Imagine how much money we'd save if we lived with your mother on a permanent basis, especially since you have every right to do so. And me, as your lawfully wedded wife too. Besides, I'm sick of living in other people's bed and breakfast. And I would also adjust the amount of money that you, as an honest, wonderful father, pay off your sons, adjust it to a much smaller side. Think about it. In the mortgage, you, of course, much more invested than the ex-wife, and in fact, she gave her the apartment. Isn't that a bit too much for her? John tried to assert his right to manage the money he'd earned, but Jenny kept nagging at him. Joan, understand, this isn't nobility anymore. It's just plain stupidity. You're sponsoring this mother of many children, and you don't even ask for an accounting of where the money goes. You think she spends it all on her kids? Don't make me laugh. She's clearly ripping you off. Wait till she files for alimony to make things harder for you. Imagine if we go on vacation and it turns out you owe her alimony. What then? The man tried to weakly defend Fiona, but Jenny just started crying, and John rushed to comfort her. The cunning woman had long ago figured out how to deal with this man to get everything she wanted. Catherine was not thrilled with her new daughter-in-law, but had to put up with the circumstances for the sake of her son's happiness. Jenny was a stark contrast to the modest, tactful Fiona. but John didn't seem to notice that his mother was growing sadder by the day. Catherine's room became increasingly filled with the odors of medicine, and several times the woman even had to call an ambulance. Doctors offered hospitalization several times, but she constantly refused, as if she feared that she would never be able to return to her own apartment as a full-fledged mistress again. John was worried about his mom, but Jenny managed to convince him that Catherine was just trying to draw attention to herself. Joan, if it were that serious and dangerous, the doctors wouldn't even ask permission, so relax. After taking a headache pill, Mickey began to fill in the data on the computer, just to avoid thinking any more about the meeting that had so disturbed him. Fiona was on her way home, glad that she had decided to go to her ex-mother-in-law's house alone first. The boys didn't need to see how weak their only grandmother was. The woman learned from Oliver that John would be out of the country for another 3 weeks. Thinking that her ex-husband didn't know anything about her mother's condition, Fiona decided to call him. Jeannie picked up the phone and, with obvious reluctance, recognizable in the disgruntled tone of her voice, handed it to John. From the brief conversation, Fiona learned that Catherine had been admitted to the hospital almost immediately after her son and daughter-in-law had flown in for their vacation. John even became indignant. "Fiona, my mother is just trying to manipulate me. She needs to keep her son close, so she agreed to go to the hospital, so I feel like a pig and come running back. She got Aunt Valia to call me and she got to you. They're all in it together, aren't they? Just to make me unhappy. You won't get anywhere. Tell your mother that." The man ended the call, and as much as Fiona tried to repeat the call, her ex-husband's machine became unavailable. The woman decided not to tell Catherine about her son's suspicions and began to visit her ex-mother-in-law every day, bringing her a little bit of her favorite dishes. On one of the visits, Fiona met Mickey in the corridor and learned that Catherine was likely to be discharged on Friday. The doctor warned, "Normally, the paperwork is ready by 11 o'clock, but I'd advise you to come a little later, at least half an hour. I'd like to talk a little more carefully about your mother-in-law's home care. She lives with you, doesn't she?" Fiona nodded to avoid any more questions and promised to be there on Friday. Mickey said, saying goodbye, "If you can, buy an adult walker for that day. Catherine mustn't get too old, and the sooner you get started, the better, and try to take your husband to the discharge so that it would be easier to bring the patient to the car, because we have nurses just to break." The woman thanked the attentive man, but did not specify that her husband was already ex and obviously would not be able to come to the hospital to meet her mother. Fiona had a bigger problem. She had to think about where to take her ex-mother-in-law. Taking Catherine to her home was out of the question. Anna, of course, lived nearby and could run in to see her friend, but could hardly provide her with full care. So, most likely, the most rational thing to do was to put the former mother-in-law at her place. However, before this, Fiona had to get Catherine's consent and at the same time not to offend the woman with pity. She began a difficult conversation, very worried, and suggested, "How do you look at staying with me and the grandchildren? They miss you very much and will be incredibly happy." Catherine, hiding tears, agreed. She herself was afraid to be alone. Fiona explained to her sons that their grandmother would now live with them. The children greeted the news with enthusiastic cries, and the woman hurried to clarify. "Grandma Catherine is a little sick, so we'll have to keep our behavior down, okay?" The sons confirmed that they would behave. Oliver and Justin immediately offered to rearrange the room so that Grandma would be comfortable. Fiona was relieved. She had no doubt that her former mother-in-law would recover more quickly in the company of her wonderful grandchildren. On the day of discharge, Fiona listened attentively to all Mickey's advice, said that she had already prepared the apartment with Catherine's health in mind, and for some reason this clarity pleased the doctor. He was pleased that his efforts would not be wasted, and that with the support of her family she would be able to return to her former activity. If he was sad that he would no longer see Fiona, he did not show it. Another visit to the ambulance ended in Catherine's hospitalization, but that was more because John and Jenny had gone on vacation, and the heartbroken woman trusted the persuasive team. Fiona had no time to call her ex-mother-in-law and was surprised when Anna came to her apartment one day without prior arrangement. The woman said she wasn't here about sewing and confessed, "Fiona, I'm sorry to burden you with problems, but I don't have anyone to talk to about this. I'm very worried. Catherine is in dire straits. Moreover, since John and his bitch moved into my girlfriend's apartment, she's gone downhill. Her health has deteriorated. She's worried sick. She went into the hospital a week ago with a suspected stroke. She didn't tell me until the last minute, hiding the fact that she was so bad. I came to check on my friend and accidentally learned from the neighbors in the room that her dear son had never visited her. The doctor treating her, Mickey, wouldn't even talk to me because I'm not related to Catherine. Or maybe he was just busy. If you can, go and see her, Fiona. I think it might make her feel better. Fiona was very surprised. Joan called Oliver the day before yesterday, telling him what he was bringing, but he didn't mention Catherine's illness. Of course, Anna, I'll be sure to visit her. Just tell me where to find Catherine. The woman dictated all the details of the hospital and the hours of reception and hurried home, glad that she was not mistaken in her opinion about Fiona's sincere nature. No matter what, she was ready to support her ex-husband's mother. A visit to her ex-mother-in-law had come as a real shock to Fiona. Always so well-groomed and trim, Catherine looked clearly unhealthy. Puffy face had a strange shade, and the eyes, so piercing before, completely lost their luster. The right hand did not obey the woman, and the corner of the mouth floated down, giving her face a mournful expression. Catherine tried to rise when she saw her visitor, but she was unable to do so. Fiona stroked her former mother-in-law's hand and asked calmly, as calmly as she could, "Why didn't you call me at once, Catherine?" Speech at the former mother-in-law became not too intelligible, but Fiona realized that she just did not want to bother her and assured, "Don't worry, everything is fine, no worries. I'll talk to your doctor and see if there's anything I need, and then I'll come and see you again." The doctor, when he found out that Fiona had come to find out about Catherine, began to sternly reprimand her. "I don't understand you relatives. A woman has been lying for a week, and only her friend, who is almost older than she is, came to see her. You must be the daughter-in-law, right?" Fiona answered humbly, choosing to keep silent about the fact that Catherine was no longer her relative. "Yes, Mickey, that's right. You say all the right things, but that's just the way it is. So as not to take up too much of your time, just tell me what I can do for Catherine. Is there any medication she needs or caregivers she needs to pay for? You tell me, please." The doctor, noticing the sincere remorse of the patient's relatives, softened. "I would have left her with us for a week to observe her condition and conduct additional tests. But I note, further recovery will depend on your joint efforts. Catherine is partially paralyzed, as you have probably already noticed, but the process can still be reversed. Massage, medication, and care of relatives have done wonders, so you should not despair. I will now give you booklets and leaflets, in which everything is printed in detail, including the basic exercises." The man ran his eyes over the text of promotional materials, something crossed out, somewhere put exclamation marks in the margins, and handed the leaflets to Fiona. "Here you go. More detailed recommendations for medication support for the mother-in-law will be printed when she is discharged." Fiona thanked the doctor and worriedly placed the envelope on his desk. Mickey became very angry and except for throwing the envelope in the visitor's face. "Goodbye, and don't do that again, do you understand?" The woman had no choice but to apologize and leave. The doctor rubbed his suddenly collapsed head. Despite the fact that there were many patients and their relatives behaved very differently, Fiona had caught his eye, whether it was her gentleness or the fire in her eyes that appeared when he spoke of her mother-in-law's favorable prospects. A pleasant woman who didn't sway and listened attentively to recommendations was good for everyone. Besides, she was married to the patient's son, her grandchildren, who had come from school and picked up her brother from kindergarten on the way, and her faithful friend were already waiting for her in the apartment. With the help of a cab driver, who turned out to be a responsive man, Fiona managed to get her former mother-in-law to the familiar door without any problems. The old woman had no idea that her return from the hospital would turn into such a heartwarming celebration. The older boys boasted about their achievements in school, and the youngest, Kevin, showed a card for the spring holiday, and then, when he realized that the souvenir was supposed to be a surprise for his mother, was very embarrassed. Catherine's mood improved considerably in the merry bustle. A blush played on her cheeks, and she enjoyed watching Fiona, who was admiring her children. The woman took her sons to help her with the food, and Anna quietly reminded her friend of an old conversation she had had after meeting John's girlfriend. "You see, I was right when I tried to defend Fiona. She's got nothing but good qualities, and she's a great parent. Look at the helpers." Catherine only for a moment saddened, but then cheered up, confirming the rightness of her friend. "Yes, Anna, everything is so. I Fiona in general, scary to say, for the last week even more dear than my son became. How she took care of me. My roommates were jealous." After lunch, which was held in a pleasant atmosphere, Anna helped her friend to get settled in the room prepared for her, and Fiona ran to the drugstore to buy what was necessary for the care of the former mother-in-law. Taking on the care of Catherine, the woman realized that it would not be easy, but it was not the care that was harder, but the increased financial burden. Fiona quit her job, believing that she could earn about as much from private orders as she could from the atelier, but would be able to stay away from home for long periods of time. John, who had blocked his ex-wife's phone, did not answer his mother's calls. Each time after another failed conversation, Catherine became sad and irritable, but Fiona never once snapped at the helpless woman. She tirelessly cheered her up with a look, a smile, or grandchildren sent in time. Life flowed in a new direction. Catherine did not get tired of admiring the former daughter-in-law. Gradually, Fiona's care gave positive results. The former mother-in-law got stronger and began to move independently, and even the right hand recovered so much that it returned to almost all the functions. Her handwriting was still uneven, but Catherine did not let herself relax. She borrowed her grandchildren's unfinished penmanship and practiced as hard as she could, having a mock competition with little Kevin. A few weeks later, when visiting the polyclinic at her place of residence, the district doctor, an experienced woman, advised to continue rehabilitation in the same spirit. "Catherine, I should suggest that you go to a sanatorium, but frankly, you don't even seem to need it." Fiona, who was accompanying Catherine, suddenly hesitated. The fact was that Mickey had mentioned something about sanatorium recovery and advised her not to turn down such an opportunity under any circumstances. She wanted her ex-mother-in-law to return to a full life, so Fiona asked for a trip. On the way home, the woman noticed that Catherine was driving with pinched lips and decided to clarify the situation. "Consider, I'm not trying to get rid of you. Not at all. I'm nervous about letting you go too. You remember your doctor, don't you? He seemed very knowledgeable and authoritative. Well, he recommended that you take advantage of a sanitarium. I'll ask Anna to keep you company. You'll see, it'll be good for you." Fiona took Anna as her accomplice, who agreed that the sanatorium was much better equipped. The woman was persuaded by a friend. "Ekaterina, you don't even think about it. It is necessary to go and recover, especially since the direction is likely to give in the sanatorium, located within the city. You know, like the direction to the former Obkamovsky Dakas. So if you suddenly don't like it, we'll call a cab and in 20 minutes we'll be home with you already drinking tea. What's there to think about?" Catherine was embarrassed that Fiona was spending money to prepare for the sanatorium, buying her former mother-in-law bathing accessories for the pool, a comfortable suit, and other small things. The elderly woman tried to object, but her former daughter-in-law did not give up and in one of the next arguments said, "Ekaterina, you once welcomed me into your family, although I, of course, even then I realized how much I have a different level with John. Let me take care of you as my own mother, at least a little." After these words, Catherine did not hold back and cried. She was so ashamed to remember how she sarcastic to her daughter-in-law. And it turns out that she not only did not hold a grudge, but also believes that she was fully accepted into the family. Fiona rushed to comfort the weeping woman and promised, "You and Anna don't worry, I'll be sure to visit you with the boys." Fiona took the cab and drove Catherine and her friend to the sanatorium, and they, excited by the new adventure in their lives, waited long after the responsive woman who had become a former mother-in-law much more dear than John. Suddenly, a car slowed down next to the bus stop pavilion. The window rolled down and Mickey, who was driving, offered Fiona and the children a ride to the busier parts of town. The woman gladly accepted. She was anxious to get home. She was tired because she had been working on a rush order last night and had only gotten a couple hours of sleep. Fiona sat down next to the doctor and asked him which way he was going so that she could get a better idea of where to get off. Mickey asked back to find out where the woman needed to go and excitedly informed her that he was on his way. Great, then I'll take you straight home. As hard as Fiona tried to stay awake, she dozed off and woke only when Oliver reached over from the back seat and touched her shoulder. Mom, wake up, we're here. Embarrassed, Fiona offered the kindly doctor money for gas money at least, but he flatly refused, explaining that he was on his way anyway. The closer approached Saturday, on which Fiona and her sons planned another trip to the sanatorium, the more the woman worried. The excitement was so strong that even her sister Alice, who had called, noticed it. Fiona was embarrassed to admit that her nervousness was due to the fact that she was likely to meet Mickey again. She liked the man very much, but the woman felt that she had absolutely nothing to hope for. Her ex-husband's words that no one would want her with 3 children came to mind. Fiona sadly noted that her sons were not really needed by their father, so it was naive to expect any warm feelings for them from a complete stranger. To Fiona's great surprise, when they met, Anna took a moment when Catherine was busy with her grandchildren to relay her conversation with Mickey. How our wonderful doctor tactfully asked why he had never seen her son around Catherine, but only you and the grandchildren. No offense, Fiona, but I told him that you and John had divorced, and he was as if he had been molded by his new wife and had forgotten everything about the world. You know, I think Mickey's got a real soft spot for you, so I'd advise you not to get lost. I know from the nurses here that he's been divorced a long time and has a reputation for not liking affairs. Maybe something good will come between you two. You both deserve to be happy, and personally, I'll be holding my fists up for your future happiness. Anna's revelation was stopped by Kevin, who ran up to his mother to show her an unusual yellow ladybug. Fiona didn't get to see Mickey on that visit, but a week later he not only gave her and the boys a ride home, but asked her out on a date. Oliver, Justin, and Kevin, from whom the man had first asked permission, advised their mother to accept the invitation. The romance between the doctor and Fiona developed rapidly. The man didn't want to waste a single day and managed to convince the woman that he could be trusted. By the time it was time for Catherine and Anna to leave the sanatorium, he had managed to win the favor of Fiona's sons and even stayed overnight several times. The woman was happy, although she was concerned about how to communicate her new relationship to Catherine. Not that she had to give her former mother-in-law a report or justify herself, but still she felt some awkwardness. However, the worries were in vain. Shrewd friends immediately noticed that there was a mutual sympathy between the doctor and Fiona. Former mother-in-law regretted only that her son missed his own happiness and betrayed the family. Catherine regretted that his actions John burned all the bridges, and Fiona will not forgive him. However, after the sanatorium to go to the apartment of the former daughter-in-law woman flatly refused. Thank you, my dear, for your care, for shelter, for affection. But it's time for me to know my honor. In guest, as they say, good, but at home is better. Catherine's return home was a surprise to both John and Jenny. The woman entered the living room, which had lost its tidy appearance because of the renovation that had begun, and asked, "Well, son, how are you doing here? You're renovating, aren't you? Well done. Why didn't you even ask me for advice, or are you now only interested in the opinion of your new wife?" The man said, "No, Ma, I just didn't want to bother you. The neighbors said that you are in a sanatorium and there probably were treatments or something like that. I was afraid I'd call at the wrong time." The older woman sighed and went to her room. She was uncomfortable listening to her favorite son's ridiculous excuses, and she admitted to herself that she missed the pleasant atmosphere in Fiona's apartment. Here, within her own walls, Catherine felt her loneliness especially acutely. A few days later in the evening, Fiona received a call from Mickey, who was on duty, informing her that an ambulance had recently taken Catherine to the hospital. The man asked the woman to come as soon as possible, saying that he couldn't say much over the phone. Asking her sons not to misbehave, the woman rushed to the meeting. The man met his beloved near the door and took her outside to report strange information. Catherine's condition was stabilized. They brought her in on time. But that's not the main thing I want to tell you. Fiona, it's not easy for me to tell you this, but I'm pretty sure that today's attack in your ex-mother-in-law was provoked by medications that are contraindicated for her. I asked her what she was taking, and she didn't say anything specific, She said she felt fine in the morning, but then she got worse in the afternoon. You see, I think there's something fishy going on. If I voice these suspicions to the police, they'll probably send me away. Tell me, could your ex-husband have poisoned your mother? The woman was shocked, but didn't think much about the answer. Joan, of course, hurt me a lot, but no, he loves his mom. Although after the wedding, he's been acting more and more like he obeys his guinea. She's the one I think is capable of anything. Mickey suggested it. Look, if you're so sure about this, John, we should open him up to the truth. I have a friend in the police who will be able to expose the poisoner, because it is quite possible that the first time Catherine went to the hospital was not accidental. Fiona's hair literally stood on end. The woman became agitated. Mickey, it's not nice of me to say this without proof, but anything's possible. John and his new wife had just gone on vacation, and before that, this lady could have put anything in the food and sort of stayed clean. In no case should an official investigation be allowed. Catherine would not be able to avoid being questioned. With her shrewdness, Jenny's suspicion would not remain a secret for long. I am afraid that Catherine will not be able to bear such information. The doctor thought for a moment. It became clear to him that it would be necessary to involve an acquaintance to bypass the existing rules, and promising not to hurry, he said goodbye to Fiona and hurried back to duty. All night he thought about the delicate situation in which his favorite woman was indirectly involved, and in the morning he consulted with a policeman he knew, who suggested that he just informally talk to the suspect. The conversation produced a most unexpected result. Jeannie, in her husband's absence, had cleared her mother-in-law's apartment of all the valuables and cash that John had kept in a well-known hiding place. Fiona had heard about it from Mickey. A friend from the police station shared the news about the missing persons report with him. John had filed the report, it turned out, so she wasn't too surprised when her confused ex-husband showed up at her door. John reached out to kiss her, but the woman recoiled so much that the man even took offense. Fiona, why are you being so out of touch? I realize I made a mistake. Let's try to build our life again, for the sake of our boys, for the sake of my mom. Seeing the change in Fiona's face, John was confused for a moment. Of course, he did not expect his ex-wife's heart to melt like chocolate in the sun, but he still hoped for a more cordial welcome. The woman didn't even let him into the apartment. On the contrary, she fumbled for her keys on the coat rack without looking away. Fiona went out to her ex-husband in the entryway, slamming the door behind her, and only then spoke. And which of your mistakes did you realize? When you cheated? When you forgot about your children and mom? Or when you brought a poisoner into the house? Fiona, you have to understand, I'm just crazy. Let's start from scratch. But the woman was adamant. Joan, you helped me make a very important discovery once. You can't be disappointed in yourself. I was needed, in spite of everything you said. All I can do, and for Catherine in the first place, is to throw out all the food and drinks from her apartment and replace them with safe ones, so that your mother will not risk her health anymore. John agreed to help in this way as well, counting on the fact that during the cleanup he would be able to remind the woman of how good they were together. But things didn't go according to his plan. Mickey joined them, and Anna happily agreed to play with Fiona's sons. By the time Catherine was discharged, there was nothing left in the apartment to harm her, and John had given up on his attempts to get his ex-wife back. He filed for a dissolution of his marriage to Jenny in absentia. On his way out of the registry office, the man ran into Fiona and Mickey on the stairs and couldn't hold back his surprised exclamation. "Why are you doing here?" Fiona smiled softly and said that they were here to apply for marriage. John, not even trying to seem sincere, wished his ex-wife happiness and, turning abruptly, hurried to his car. The man sat for a long time without moving from his seat and speculating about the moment when his life turned in the wrong direction. Now only his mother was left next to him, before whom he was irredeemably guilty.
"Happy birthday, Savannah," exclaimed her mother, bringing a big beautiful cake with 5 candles into the room. "Well, daughter, make a wish and blow out the candles," said the father, eyeing the birthday girl. "I want us to always be together." The girl said her wish aloud and quietly added, "and a big doll from the department store." Everyone laughed, and the grandmother opened the closet door and took out the doll that Savannah had asked her mother for the day before, but she said she wasn't ready to spend that much money on toys. The girl was confused with joy. She looked at the doll and did not move. "Well, why are you standing there as if petrified?" Grandfather asked with a smile. "Dreams must come true." Savannah ran up to her grandmother and, stretching out her arms to the much-desired gift, whispered, "Thank you, Grandma and Grandpa. You're the best." "Ruthie Finn, you're spoiling Savannah too much," the birthday girl's mother said in a disgruntled tone. She didn't think it was necessary to fulfill every whim of a child, but her husband's parents didn't share her view. "Joanna, when else can you spoil her?" Grandfather interceded. "We don't know how life will turn out in the future. Let the child be happy." "And who else should we spoil, as not the only granddaughter?" supported her husband mother-in-law. Savannah was used to such conversations. She had heard them from a very young age, so she did not react in any way. Sitting at the table, mentally she was already in the yard with her new doll. All the girls will be jealous, Savannah thought and smiled at her thoughts. Joanna and Peter met at a party with mutual friends 7 years ago. For the guy, it was love at first sight, and Joanna already had a beau. She dreamed of marrying him and made far-reaching plans for their future together. But only the beau was not in a hurry to propose marriage. According to his own admission, he has not yet walked. "Why rush? We need to look at each other," he said, looking around. "I'm 21 years old now," Joanna explained to him. "I want a family, children. What's the point of stalling? We've already been dating for 2 years." But her words flew past the beau's ears. "And here is the birthday party of a classmate, to which were invited friends of her fiancé." Among them stood out Peter, tall, handsome, smart, intelligent, with higher education, and even with money, but very shy. However, his shyness did not prevent him from proposing to Joanna on the second date. The girl realized that she did not feel love for her new acquaintance, but she really wanted to rub her beau's nose in it. So not thinking long, she agreed. 2 months later, they had a lavish wedding. Everything as it should be. White dress, veil, cortege of several identical cars. Her friends were dying of envy. "Well, Joanna, good for you. You got yourself such a guy. A city boy with an apartment, even if it's his parents, well-to-do. Now, like a cheese and butter, you will ride," they said. After the wedding, the newlyweds went on vacation in Turkey. For a whole week they basked in the sun on the hot sand, breathed the sea air, and enjoyed the sound of the surf. Joanna was happy, but that feeling quickly passed. After returning from the wedding trip, they plunged into everyday life. Peter worked from morning to evening. Joanna studied at the last year of trade school. The newlyweds saw each other only at breakfast and in the evening, when Peter came home from work, but Joanna was even glad of it. After studying, she had time to meet with her girlfriends, gossip with them. She saw her ex-boyfriend a couple times. He was walking in the company of his new girlfriend and did not pay any attention to her. His indifference hurt Joanna's ego, and she decided to herself, "I'm going to be happy. In spite of you, I will." After the wedding, the newlyweds lived with Peter's parents. In their 2-room apartment in the city center, of course, not scattered, but there was enough room for everyone. In that smaller room lived the owners, and the big one was given to his son and daughter-in-law. My mother-in-law took care of the housework. "You'll have time, you'll work hard," she said maternally to Joanna. "All life ahead, here will be born children, then and learn to cook, and washing, and ironing. And while you are young, have fun and enjoy life." My daughter-in-law didn't resist. She was satisfied with such a carefree life. After graduating from school, she got a job in the nearest store to the house. The salary was small, but it was enough for small pleasures. On weekends, Joanna had fun with her friends at karaoke or at the disco, and occasionally bought herself some new clothes. Peter did not resent. He was pleased to see his wife satisfied and happy. Friends envied, and at the same time surprised. "Not a man, but a dream," they said about Peter. "And anything does not limit, does not prohibit anything. No scolding. You, Joanna, you should carry him in your arms. He should thank God that he met me on his way," she replied with a laugh. Not everyone agrees to live with her parents. "Yes, your mother-in-law is a holy woman," exclaimed friends. "One can only dream of such a woman." "Then dream on," Joanna parried. "But for me it's better to live separately." But Peter seems to be happy with it, she concluded sadly. A year after the wedding, Joanna became pregnant. Peter was happy. He blew the dust off his beloved wife. Ruthie and Finn were looking forward to having a granddaughter. They took care of their daughter-in-law, didn't let her overwork, made sure she ate well, and got enough sleep. Her mother-in-law shielded her from all household chores, although Joanna was not particularly eager to help her husband's mother. She liked to live on her own. At the same time, the young wife and future mother did not forget to mention at every opportunity, "It's not my apartment for me to do anything in." When Savannah was born, Joanna, strangely enough, did not feel any particular joy. She thought she was ready for motherhood, but the newborn baby only annoyed her. "I did not think that the child requires so much attention to himself," she complained to her friends. "It seemed to me that the first year he only does what he sleeps. But as it turns out, that's not true. Savannah wakes up bright and early in the morning, sleeps outside during the day, and at night he has to play with her. I'm exhausted, and what my figure has become like. Stomach protruding, breasts sagging, circles under my eyes. Joanna, you can't complain," her friends resented her. "Your mother-in-law freed you from household chores. Your duties are only to take care of your daughter, and you're not happy again." "Peter doesn't help me at all," she said with resentment. "He comes home from work, plays with his daughter for half an hour and goes to bed. What do you want? Your husband works all day and at night he has to take care of the baby while you sleep." "I don't know," claimed Joanna with annoyance, "but it's his daughter too." Time passed. The girl grew up. She no longer woke up at night and did not require constant attention. Joanna went to work and breathed a sigh of relief. Every morning she took her daughter to daycare and hurried to the store. In the evening, the young mother was in no hurry to return home. After waiting for her daughter to go outside, Joanna made a scandal. She was hurt that no one had consulted her. The gifts from her father and his parents pleased the birthday girl more than the new dress she had bought. Almost crying, she reproached her husband that he only spoiled his daughter, and she had to bring her up and raise her. Unable to bear her daughter-in-law's accusations, Ruthie stood up for him for the first time since her son's wedding. "Joanna," she said in a calm, even tone, "instead of rejoicing with your daughter, you are making a scandal on her birthday. What's wrong with granting her wishes? The dress you picked out for Savannah is beautiful, but she's just a kid, and toys are more important to her than outfits." "That's not the point at all," my sister-in-law retorted. "It's just that you're trying to show me that I'm a bad mother, a bad wife, and a bad mistress." "Joanna, you are wrong," tried to calm her mother-in-law. "You are still young, and you don't understand many things because of your inexperience. But everything will come with time. If only there was a will." "Are you saying I'm lazy? I don't want to do anything, and I don't do it." "Odia, don't yell at my mom," Peter intervened. "You live in my parents' apartment on your own. They take care of our daughter. Savannah spends most of her time with them. You have no moral right to talk to your mom like that." "I am still living in your parents' apartment because my husband can't afford to buy a separate place. You always say that you need to wait a little and everything will happen. But how long can we wait? We've been together for almost 7 years and still there." Peter was silent. Ruthie and Finn looked at their son sympathetically. After a short pause, the man said, "I wanted to surprise you on our wedding anniversary, but I guess I'll have to give up that idea. I've saved up enough money for a separate apartment. On the next weekend, we can look at the options and decide on the purchase of his apartment." Joanna opened her mouth in surprise. There was no trace of her previous resentment. She ran up to her husband and threw her. "Joanna," she said a little irritably, "will you be picking Savannah up from daycare today?" Joanna glanced at the clock. The hand showed the beginning of 8. Her husband was supposed to pick her up, Joanna replied. "I'll be there soon." Calling a cab, the woman dialed Peter's number all the way, but all she heard in response was a long dial tone. Out of anger over the ruined party, Joanna ran into the daycare center at 7:45. Savannah was sitting on a bench near her locker, fiddling with a rag doll. The teacher was showing her displeasure. "Excuse me," said Joanna, picking up her daughter. "I don't understand why her husband didn't pick her up." On the way home, ignoring Savannah, she tugged irritably at her daughter's arm and grumbled to herself, calling her husband an irresponsible egomaniac, a liar, and a bad father. As she crossed the threshold of the house, Joanna heard the phone ring. Mother-in-law popped up on the screen. "What does she want?" She grumbled. "It's like a conspiracy. Everyone urgently needed me today." "Hello? Joanna, Trouble. That was the first thing she heard on the phone. Peter's in the hospital. Tell me exactly what happened, she asked her sister-in-law in a frustrated tone. The accident, swallowing her tears, explained her mother-in-law. Peter is in surgery. I called you, but you didn't answer. Joanna left her daughter with a neighbor and went to the hospital. The doctor met her and told her that the victim had died on the operating table. Not immediately realizing the doctor's words, Joanna looked at her husband's parents sitting on the couch. Ruthie was weeping, and Finn sat pale as a sheet, cradling his grief-stricken wife in his arms. The next week passed like a blur. Sad faces, words of condolence, some people. But suddenly it was all gone. The empty house and the emptiness of the soul. Only her daughter as a reminder of her old life. Savannah, already shy, became withdrawn. She moved silently around the apartment like a shadow. Sorrow and sadness settled in her little heart. Time passed. Joanna gradually accepted her fate as a young widow. Unlike her, Savannah missed her father very much. She spent all her time with her favorite cat that her father had given her. The grandparents supported their granddaughter as best they could. They often took her and the cat to their house. Their love and kindness helped her cope with the loss of her father. When Savannah went to first grade, Joanna brought a strange man into the house. I'd like you to meet him, she said. This is my daughter Savannah, and this is Uncle Jack, who will be your daddy. The girl did not like her mother's new acquaintance. He was a short, stocky man with stubble on his cheeks and chin, and he was the opposite of Peter. The man held out his hand to the girl without a single muscle on his face. Savannah hid her little hand behind her back and said, My daddy is dead. Soon Uncle Jack moved with his belongings into Joanna's apartment. His relationship with Savannah didn't go well from day one. The girl didn't like the fact that a strange man was running their house, and the shelves where her father's clothes had been were now full of his things. But no one was interested in her opinion. Her mother was completely infatuated with her new beau. She tried her best to please him, sometimes forgetting about her own daughter. Ruthie and Finn were very worried about their granddaughter. They could see that Savannah was not accepting of her mother's roommate. Whenever possible, the grandparents took their granddaughter with them. A few months later, Joanna announced that she was pregnant. In view of this, she and Jack decided to get married. On the rights of Joanna's husband, the man began to take an active part in the upbringing of her daughter. For every innocent misdemeanor, he scolded her and punished her. The mother never stood up for Savannah. She was always on the side of the new husband. In due time, a baby girl appeared in the family. They named her Lotta. Now she took all of Joanna and Jack's attention. They spent every spare minute with her. When the mother needed to do something around the house, she asked her eldest daughter to look after her sister. At such moments, Savannah looked with interest at the tiny hands and fingers of the newborn baby, talked to her and stroked her head, which had a light fuzz instead of hair. The girl felt no dislike or jealousy toward her sister. Savannah dreamed that when Fiona grew up, they would be best friends. Time passed, but the relationship between stepfather and stepdaughter did not get better. Savannah's constant presence annoyed Jack, but there was no hiding in the one-room apartment. One day, Savannah unwittingly witnessed a conversation between her mother and her new husband. What do you suggest? Joanna asked. Where am I going to put her? For starters, we could exchange the apartment for a larger one with 2 or 3 rooms, Jack suggested. I can't sell this apartment without the consent of my mother-in-law and father-in-law, the woman replied. They have shares in it after their son's death. So you should talk to them. Convince them that we are cramped with 4 people in one room, the husband insisted. When Savannah noticed, the couple was silent. A few days later, when Joanna brought her daughter to her grandparents, they talked again. After listening to her daughter-in-law, her mother-in-law asked, Joanna, are you sure there's room for Savannah in the new apartment? What do you mean? Clarified daughter-in-law. If you and your husband decide to take out a mortgage and said, we can buy your share of the apartment from you. You'll have the money for the down payment and we'll have the memory of our son. Joanna was not particularly pleased with her father-in-law's offer. She expected to get the whole apartment. But seeing the intransigence of her first husband's parents, she agreed. Ruthie and Finn sold their favorite dacha, where many years of rest from the bustle of the city, their car and garage. The money was just enough to buy out Joanna's share. And for Savannah? Surprised daughter-in-law asked, counting the money. We'll give Savannah the apartment when she grows up, Ruthie promised. Jack was the most unhappy with the deal. Let her stay in her own apartment, he said, referring to his stepdaughter. You see, I'm supposed to feed and clothe her, and then she won't say thank you, and she'll fly off to her own apartment. I'll be working my ass off for the rest of my life, and she's already got her own place. Jack, what could I do? Joanna justified herself to him. Don't be upset. We'll earn our own. Yes, we'll earn it. Her husband sneered. With our salaries, we will live in hunger now. But you wanted a spacious apartment, Joanna reminded him. I didn't know the apartment wasn't yours, the husband admitted. If I had, I wouldn't have gotten involved with you in the first place. Jack, what are you talking about? The woman said in a frightened tone. You didn't get involved with me because of the apartment. No, of course not, he reminded himself, stroking his little daughter's head as she ran up to him. He was very fond of Fiona. I just don't think it's fair that one of your daughters already has an apartment and the other one is homeless. Fiona was growing up with her father, and Savannah had only real estate left from her father, Joanna argued. The new apartment had 2 rooms. One was for Joanna and Jack, and the other was a nursery. Savannah and Fiona were friendly. The older sister enjoyed taking care of the younger sister, and the younger sister paid the older sister with her love, which Savannah lacked in her new family. Her stepfather still paid no attention to her, except when she needed to be scolded or punished for something. Her mother had always been cold to Savannah, and with the birth of her second daughter, she had grown cold to her. One day, when Savannah was in 6th grade, she came home from school earlier than usual. Her mother was at work, her sister was in kindergarten, and her stepfather had been home for days. He had been fired from his job and was looking for another one. That afternoon, Savannah noticed another woman's shoes in the hallway. When Jack saw his stepdaughter, he was furious. What are you doing home at this hour? He yelled. You're supposed to be at school. I felt bad, and I was released from the last lesson. The girl excused herself, looking at someone else's shoes. Do we have company? No, it's a neighbor who came by. She was just leaving, answered the stepfather. Go to your room. Waiting until Savannah was out the door, Jack saw her off and went to his stepdaughter's room. How are you feeling? He asked for the first time in all the years of living with Savannah's mother. I'm fine, she replied, surprised by her stepfather's concern. Savannah, don't tell your mother that the neighbor came by, Jack asked. Otherwise she'll think of something. Think what? The girl didn't understand. Nothing, said the stepfather. Just don't tell her. Savannah didn't tell her mother about the neighbor's visit, but she noticed that Joanna's relationship with her husband had become strained. They often fought, accusing each other of every mortal sin. Often the girls were caught in the middle. Savannah went more and more often to her grandparents, where she was still loved and pitied. One day, after another family scandal, she packed her things and left, telling her mother, I don't want to put up with your husband anymore. I'm sick of the endless scolding. I'm going to a place where I'm always welcome and where I'm always expected. Joanna did not dissuade her daughter. At that moment, it was as if a stone had been lifted from her shoulders. For the next week, she never called her mother-in-law and asked her how her daughter was doing. Meanwhile, Savannah seriously took up her studies, which in recent years limped, corrected all her bad grades. Teachers noted the changes in the girl. She became calm, more sociable, cheerful. Savannah did not remember about her mother. She only missed her little sister. By her senior year, Savannah had made up her mind about her choice of profession. I will study psychology, she told her grandparents. Our university has a psychology department. Well, that's a good choice. Finn supported her. Psychology is a serious science, Ruthie agreed. When she heard about her daughter's decision, Joanna laughed. What kind of profession is that? Being the shoulder to cry on for strangers. She said, you don't have enough problems of your own to solve other people's problems. Why are you doing this? Her mother's reaction didn't surprise Savannah. She was used to Savannah ridiculing all her ideas and considering them delusional. Maybe I can understand you, the daughter explained. Why do you live with a man who doesn't respect or appreciate you? Why do you love him more than your own daughters? Aren't you ashamed to talk like that? Joanna was indignant. Jack raised you. He replaced your father. He dotes on Fiona. And if we fight a lot, that's what everybody fights about. Mom, do you really believe what you're saying? Savannah was surprised. He's been and still is sitting on your neck all his life. He may love Fiona, but he has nothing to do with me. You're wrong if you think that this bum, Alfonso and womanizer could replace my father. He's no match for my dad. My grandparents raised me, but but you, for some reason, think otherwise. I'm not judging you. It's your choice. Everyone has what they deserve." As she listened to her eldest daughter's words, Joanna silently gulped air with her mouth open, as if she couldn't get enough of it. Finally, when Savannah was silent, her mother gritted her teeth. "You and great." Savannah only smiled, remembering how she had left her mother's house a few years ago and never once regretted it. "You are wrong, Mom," she answered calmly to Joanna's accusation. "I am very grateful to my father, from whom I inherited wonderful genes. I am immensely grateful to my grandparents, who put their souls into me, taught me to forgive and appreciate the good things I have. I am grateful to you for giving me life and not preventing me from leaving home. I'm even grateful to Fiona, who loves me and respects me, unlike you. But I have nothing to be grateful to a stranger who came to our house years ago on a whim and did not lift a finger to earn my trust and favor." Joanna answered her daughter nothing. With a glare, she ran out of the apartment, slamming the door loudly. Savannah enrolled in college. She liked her chosen specialty. She devoted all her time to her studies. Savannah was well regarded by her teachers. She was predicted a great professional future. After graduating from the institute with a red diploma, Savannah, among the 5 best students, was sent for an internship in one of the centers of psychological help to people in difficult life situations. The girl was happy to get such a chance. Ruthie and Finn were proud of their granddaughter. They decided that it was high time to give her a worthy gift. "Savannah," her grandmother addressed her, "you know how much your grandfather and I love you, and we want you to be happy. We are proud of your accomplishments and hope that they will only increase from here on out. You are now an adult, fully capable of living on your own. We've decided." Ruthie paused to catch her breath. "We decided to give you an apartment," her grandfather finished for her. Savannah couldn't believe her eyes when she found herself in the very apartment where she had been happy, where the walls still remembered her father. "I thought it had been sold a long time ago," she admitted. Her mom said that they had put the proceeds as a down payment on the apartment they still lived in. "Yeah, we had to buy Joanna out," Finn admitted. "So that's why you sold the house, the car, and the garage," Savannah guessed. "And we don't regret it one bit," Ruthie said. "You're our only granddaughter. You're all we have left of Peter. So please accept our gift as a token of our undying love for you." "Thank you." Savannah thanked them through tears of happiness. "I love you too. You are my most dear people in this world." Soon Savannah moved into her own apartment. She could not visit her grandparents every day, but she called them regularly to check on their health. After an internship at the Center for Psychological Help to People in Difficult Life Situations, Savannah was offered to stay there to work. "The salary is small, but the experience will be great," the director said, holding out her employment contract. Savannah agreed without hesitation. She had gotten used to the team during the year. Besides, she liked helping people. She got inexplicable pleasure from the fact that someone, thanks to her, became a little happier. Fiona often visited her older sister. Savannah got news from her, though it was hardly news. Nothing had changed in her mother's household. Jack still wasn't working, but he said he was looking for a decent job, which was hard to believe. "I've seen my father with other women a few times," Fiona confessed one day. "I think he's cheating on Mom." "Fiona, don't think about it," her sister advised her. "Let the parents sort it out themselves. Getting involved in a couple's relationship is a thankless task." "You're probably right," Fiona agreed. "Can I stay at your place tonight?" "What about school?" "We don't have school tomorrow," she explained. "We're going on a field trip as a class." "Then you can stay," Savannah said happily. On nights like this, the sisters didn't go to bed for long. They ate dinner and talked for hours over a cup of tea. Fiona shared her secrets with her sister, asked for advice, told her about her plans for life. Savannah listened to her with pleasure. She liked that, despite their different fathers and age difference, they were very close. When Savannah turned 25, she didn't organize a feast with her friends. The birthday girl invited her grandmother, grandfather, Fiona, and mother. However, Joanna, citing ill health, did not come, congratulating her daughter on the phone. Fiona was sad and silent that evening, waving her hand in the air and turning the subject away. Ruthie and Finn congratulated their granddaughter and wished her to meet a decent man. "When you're married to a trustworthy man, then you can die with peace of mind," Finn said. "Grandfather, what are you talking about?" His granddaughter stopped him. "You'll still have great-grandchildren to nurse." "God willing," Ruthie whispered quietly. But it did not happen what they had wished for. 6 months later, after a heart attack, Finn died. Ruthie had outlived her husband by a year. Before he died, however, she had made a will for her granddaughter. To Savannah's surprise, Joanna came to her mother-in-law's funeral. She hadn't spoken to her first husband's parents or been to her father-in-law's funeral in all these years, but here she was. "Mom, thank you for being there," her eldest daughter thanked her. "I couldn't leave you alone on such a day," the mother replied. "Nothing has changed here," she said, looking around the apartment. "Except for the wallpaper. They haven't even changed the furniture." "Mom, what are you talking about?" Savannah couldn't believe her ears. "What do you mean, what?" her mother explained without embarrassment. "It's been so many years since we left this apartment, and it feels like yesterday. We could have at least changed the furniture." "I don't think this is the right moment to discuss this," the daughter remarked, "but I want to remind you that my grandparents raised me, fed me, clothed me. You forgot about me the moment I left home." "Don't exaggerate, daughter. I always remembered you. But I realized that you would be better off with them," the mother justified herself. After waiting for a while, Joanna came to Savannah with the cake. What an unexpected visit. The daughter couldn't help pouring tea. "To what do I owe the honor?" "Don't be sarcastic," Joanna asked her. "After all, I'm your mother. I'm worried about you." "It's strange to hear you say that, after all these years," Savannah admitted, "but it feels good." Joanna was suddenly silent, looking around. Finally, taking a sip of tea, she asked, "What do you plan to do with the apartment?" "Nothing. I'll renovate it and move in." "Why do you need a 2-room apartment all by yourself?" "It's not just an apartment," Savannah replied. "It's where I grew up and was happy. And besides, it's in the center of town, a 5-minute walk from my work." After a brief pause, her mother asked, "What about your studio apartment?" "It won't go to waste," Savannah assured her. "I'll rent it out." Clearly not satisfied with her older daughter's plans, Joanna finished her tea and said goodbye. Eventually, Savannah renovated the 1-bedroom apartment and moved out, renting the 1-bedroom to a coworker. By Savannah's time, Fiona had graduated from high school and enrolled in college. Joanna continued to visit her eldest daughter in order to persuade her to give the apartment to her sister. "I don't understand what Fiona has to do with this apartment," Savannah wondered. "Why should I give it to her?" "But you two get along so well." "She's your little sister," Joanna argued. "You can't be so selfish." "I inherited the apartment from my father. Fiona has her own father. Let him take care of his daughter." "Savannah, you know Jack has nothing to offer his daughter, right?" Joanna tried to persuade her, but seeing Savannah's intransigence, she used one last argument. "By the way, this apartment is as much mine as yours. I'm an heiress just like you. I'm entitled to a share of the apartment." "Yes," agreed the daughter. "You had the right until you sold your share to your grandparents, and they disposed of their property as they saw fit, and I will not violate their will." "What kind of a mother are you if you can't negotiate with your own daughter?" Jack reprimanded his wife. "Legally, she was right," John replied. "She inherited both apartments, and I can't do anything about it." "What does law have to do with family?" the man insisted. "Why does she need 2 apartments by herself? She used to live in a 1-room apartment, and she could go on living there. She'd give the 2-bedroom to her sister, especially since Fiona's getting married. And when the kids are born, where will we all be housed together?" "No, I can't have a strange man in my apartment." "What do you suggest?" "I've talked to Savannah many times, but she's stubborn. She says, 'Mine, that's it.' If she won't do it nicely, then we'll try a trick," Jack said. "She's renting out a studio apartment anyway. What does she care who she rents to? Fiona should ask Fiona to be her tenant." "Why?" Joanna didn't realize. Savannah wouldn't take money from her own sister. Her conscience wouldn't allow it, Jack suggested, and even if she did, she'd be out of money in a couple months. Savannah wouldn't be able to kick Fiona out on the street. Joanna thought about what her husband had said. "It doesn't seem right," she hesitated. "Is it right when in one family one child is living and the other begging?" When Fiona returned from the institute, her father called her for a talk. "Daughter, we've been discussing it with your mother, and we've decided that it's unfair for one sister to have everything and the other nothing." "I'm talking about Savannah's apartments," Jack explained. "But she inherited them from her father," she reminded him. "I have no claim on her." "Maybe you don't, but I do," the father said irritably. "Selfishness must be rooted out." "What do you suggest?" Fiona asked. The father outlined his devious plan to his daughter. Fiona listened carefully and turned to her mother. Do you agree with it? Joanna shrugged her shoulders uncertainly, but then answered, But you have to live somewhere. Your Adam is a country boy. You can't live in a dormitory. It's expensive to rent an apartment, and it's inconvenient for everyone to live with us. That's why you decided to take Savannah's apartment. Daughter, watch your language. Her mother shouted at her. This is your sister we're talking about. I thought it was about our family enemy. Fiona retorted. Mom, Savannah is your own daughter, just like me. She suffered enough. I wouldn't want her to be an orphan with her mother alive. And now to deprive her of financial compensation for her lack of love. What are you talking about? Joanna was indignant. Your father and I are doing our best for you. I think he's right. It would be better to try to earn an apartment for me and give it to me as a wedding present. My father only talks, but does nothing. I didn't expect such meanness from you, Fiona said and ran out of the house. She walked down the street and thought about what had happened. Fiona loved her sister and sometimes did not understand why her mother was so cold to her. What could so mess up a child to send her to live with her grandparents? Didn't she miss her eldest daughter for all these years? Doesn't Mom realize that she is pushing Savannah farther and farther away from her with her attitude? These and other questions arose in Fiona's mind one after another. She was walking wherever she was going, and when she stopped, she realized she had come to her sister's workplace. After standing in front of the entrance to the center for a few minutes, the girl stepped inside. She had been here a few times, but had never paid attention to the patients or clients of this facility. Today, as she walked up to the nurse's office, she was confronted by several women. They were all different in age, status, and appearance. But the one thing they had in common was the deep sadness, if nothing else, the detachment in each one's eyes. I guess they lack love too, Fiona thought to herself. Sighs. She heard Savannah's voice behind her. What are you doing here? Inviting her guest into the study, Savannah poured tea and sat down next to her sister. You seem strange, she noted. Did something happen? Did you have a fight with Adam? Or something with Mom? No, they're fine, Fiona reassured her sister. Savannah stopped talking and looked at her carefully, but the girl didn't dare to speak. She seemed to regret coming here. Savannah didn't insist on talking. She drank her tea silently and occasionally glanced at her sister. Savannah, do you love Mom? Fiona asked suddenly. Of course, the older sister answered without hesitation. Why do you ask? I've always been surprised by her so different attitude towards us, Fiona admitted. It often seemed to me that you were not her own daughter. She always neglected you with attention, affection, care, love. Why so? Why do you have such thoughts? Savannah was surprised. I thought, what if I have more than one child? Will I love someone more? Sis, Savannah smiled and hugged Fiona. It's pre-wedding jitters. To a mother, all children are the same, and you will love them all. Why are we treated differently? Fiona didn't give up. I've been thinking about that too, Savannah admitted. Maybe Mommy resents Daddy for leaving her alone with a small child, she said. What nonsense. How can you take offense at a man for being dead? The girls drank tea in silence and thought about their own things. Finally, Savannah stood up, cleared the table, and sitting down next to her sister and taking her hand, said, It's going to be different for you. You and Adam love each other, and when children are born, you will love them too. And Mom, Savannah was silent for a few seconds and continued, Mom is an unhappy woman. She needs to be understood and pitied. She was a young widow after her first marriage, and her second husband was a bum and an Alfonso. I'm sorry. I'm not offended, Fiona replied. I love my father, but he's really been living off my mother all his life. Why has she put up with him for so many years? Does she love him? More like she's afraid of being alone, Savannah suggested. She can't be alone. She has us. Fiona was childishly indignant. There was a knock on the door, and a woman came in the next second. Savannah, I need your help, she said, and then she was gone as suddenly as she had appeared. Savannah got up from her chair and walked over to her sister. It was good to see you. Don't fill your pretty little head with bad thoughts. You're going to be fine, and I'll always be there for you. And if you need my help, I'll be there for you. I didn't think my daughter would grow up to be selfish, Joanna said after Savannah refused to give one of the apartments to her sister. Maybe I should have been more involved in her upbringing, and she wouldn't have grown up selfish, Savannah argued. Are you saying that your grandparents didn't treat you well? Your mother was surprised. No, I'm saying that they raised you the way they thought was right, the daughter explained, and you have no moral right to judge them. They gave me much more than you did. Joanna didn't like this kind of talk. She could not accept criticism of herself, especially from her daughter. Perhaps it hurt her that Savannah was telling the truth, and she felt guilty in her heart for her eldest daughter. Preparations for Fiona's wedding were in full swing. The date had already been set, invitations sent out and rings purchased when Savannah had been asked to head the new branch of the center for people in difficult situations. But that would mean traveling to another city. She hesitated. I'm not ready to give up everything right now. Is there anything to give up? The director asked. Is there something keeping you here? Or maybe someone? No, Savannah was embarrassed. It's just that my sister's wedding is coming up. Oh, good. You can go on vacation, she suggested. You'll gain experience, you'll get the branch up and running, and in a year or two you'll be back here in my place. Savannah had no reason to say no. The colleague who rented her apartment had also moved to another city. Savannah, aware of her sister's housing problem, offered her and her husband a one-room apartment for a while until they could find a place of their own. Fiona was happy and did not hide it. Only her stepfather was dissatisfied. She could have offered her sister a two-bedroom, he grumbled. After Savannah left, Fiona called her often to share the latest news. One day she blurted out that her mother was on sick leave. Is it serious? Savannah was worried. There was silence for a while, but then Fiona laughed playfully and said, No, it's nothing. After talking to her sister, Savannah's anxiety persisted. It seemed to her that Fiona wasn't telling her the whole story. She called her mother. Joanna didn't answer the phone right away, but when she picked up the receiver and heard her eldest daughter's voice, she was very happy, much to Savannah's surprise. Fiona said, You're sick. She's a chatterbox, her mother said cheerfully. 2 sneezes and she's already told everyone. I didn't tell everyone, Mom, Savannah said reproachfully. That's not what I meant. Joanna began to defend herself. Don't worry, I'm fine. Tell me what's new with you. You're not going back yet? No, things are just starting to settle down around here. I don't think we'll be fully operational for another 6 months at the earliest. Jack hasn't got a job. He's been moonlighting here and there, Joanna mused. I see, same as always. I've got to go, my mother suddenly hurried off. Call me, don't be a stranger, she said and hung up. Savannah listened to the short beats for a while. She found this conversation strange. Her usually disgruntled mother was as sweet and cheerful as ever. 6 months passed for Savannah. The work at the center's branch office was well established. After the inspection, the superiors were not stingy with compliments. Savannah was proud of herself and her team. In addition, she had a man in her life. She met John at the center. He worked as an EMT, and one day when he arrived on a call, he saw an elderly woman who had been beaten. She refused to be hospitalized, and she was afraid to stay at home. It's not the first time my husband has beaten me, but I have never seen him so angry, she confessed to the doctor. Call the police, he suggested. No way, the woman was frightened. He'll kill me when he comes back. Why don't you leave him? The doctor asked. Where will I go? I have no one left. No relatives, no friends. That man has driven everyone away from home. John felt truly sorry for the old woman, and he suggested that she contact the center for assistance to people in difficult life situations. Not immediately, but still the old woman agreed. John drove her himself and handed her over to Savannah. Subsequently, he visited the center several times and was interested in the well-being of his ward. The young people's working relationship quickly turned into sympathy, and a month after their first meeting, John introduced Savannah to his parents. Although John was not much older than Savannah, his parents were quite elderly. Intelligent, courteous, and pleasant to be around, they reminded Savannah of her grandparents. From that day on, she became a frequent visitor to John's family. When are you leaving? John asked. Tomorrow morning, Savannah replied. Sadness flashed in the young man's eyes. I'll be waiting for you, he promised. I'll be there as soon as I'm done with the paperwork. The lovers could not part for a long time. The next day, Savannah reached home by lunchtime. When she closed the door behind her, she leaned against the wall and remembered with pleasure the happy moments when her grandparents were still alive. Her memories were interrupted by the phone ringing. I'm listening, she said into the receiver. Hi, sis. Fiona's voice sounded familiar. When are you coming? I'm already home, Savannah answered. After a short pause, Fiona continued, I didn't want to tell you, but you'll find out anyway. Mom's in the hospital. What's wrong with her? Let's not talk on the phone. I'm going to visit her this afternoon. Let's go together. Having settled the formalities of her transfer to her hometown to become the director of the help center, Savannah, she'd taken a few sick days to avoid showing up to work with bruises, but this is the first time she's been to the hospital. Why did you tell me? My mom told me not to. Did you file a police report? Savannah asked. What are you talking about? Mom doesn't even want to hear about it. A nurse stopped the girls at the checkpoint. You can't go in together. You go, Fiona suggested and handed her sister a robe. When she saw her eldest daughter, Joanna couldn't help but cry. Savannah's heart squeezed with pity. Always cold, always dissatisfied, the stern woman now looked like a wounded bird. Savannah wanted to hug her, hold her close, pity her, and tell her everything would be all right, but she held back her impulse. Sitting down next to the bed, she asked, How are you feeling? Already fine, answered the mother, wiping the tears on her face. Don't you want to tell me what happened? Joanna silently turned away to the window. Tears flowed from her eyes again. She was ashamed to admit to her daughter what had happened. Mom, I can help you, Savannah said, if you want me to. Joanna continued to swallow her tears in silence. Did Jack do this? Why? He's been drinking lately, her mother finally spoke. His drinking takes up most of my paycheck. If I don't give him money, he raises his hand to me. And this time Jack came with his drinking buddies. I refused to set the table for them. Why do you put up with this? Why don't you leave him? Why don't you go to the police? Do you still love him? I'm afraid of him, Joanna confessed. He won't let me live. First, file a police report, Savannah advised. No. What are you talking about? Scared mom. You have no idea what he could do. Did you forget where I work? Savannah reminded her. I hear stories like this every day. If you don't do anything, it's not going to do any good. Either you get rid of your tyrant and Alfonso, or I'll wash my hands of you. All right, Joanna agreed. I'll do as you say. Upon learning of the statement, Jack went to his wife to confess. He swore that it would never happen again, that he would get a job and stop drinking. On her daughter's advice, Joanna was adamant. Still ingratiating and weeping, Jack became furious after his wife refused to take his statement from the police. Losing control of himself, he began yelling and threatening to kick her out of the house. Security escorted him out of the hospital and, at Savannah's request, informed her of the incident. In the evening, she went to her stepfather's house. After listening to him swear and threaten her, Savannah pulled out her phone and turned on the tape recorder, where everything was clearly audible. I'll pass this on, she warned. If you carry out any of your threats, you're going down for a long time. I'll make sure of that. Why did you come? Jack asked, realizing that this time it would be noisy. It was obvious that Joanna was confused, having been rebuffed by her daughter. She looked at her silently and flapped her eyelashes. What about us? The mother could only say. You have your own life, I have mine. Savannah answered and turned around and walked in the other direction. Savannah, is it true? Are you trying to kick us out of your apartment? Her little sister chirped into the phone. Who told you that? Savannah asked, not knowing what she was talking about. Mom, Fiona answered. She said you're selling the apartments and moving to the capital. Is that true? Maybe, Savannah admitted, starting to come out of her sleep. When were you going to tell me? Fiona shouted suddenly. You know where I am, don't you? I'm not supposed to worry. And you didn't even bother to tell me that Adam and I were going to be on the street soon. Don't be so dramatic, sis. Savannah tried to calm her down. Sus, Fiona asked her again. A sister would never do that. You know we have no place to live, and yet you're going to sell the apartment you invited us to. Savannah finally woke up to this kind of attack from her relative. She didn't like the tone in which Fiona had spoken to her. Was that in lieu of a thank you? She asked. I'd like to remind you that my offer was temporary. You and Adam were going to take out a mortgage, Savannah reminded her. I just wanted to help you save money on rent. What money are you talking about? Fiona was nervous. We're barely making ends meet. Adam studies and works, but his paycheck doesn't even pay for entertainment. Not to mention any major purchases. Why don't you ask your mom? Savannah suggested it. I'm sure she'd be willing to make you feel welcome. You bet she would. Fiona replied hotly, "Mom is not you. She wouldn't spare anything for me. She'd give me her own apartment if you hadn't ruined it. I'm embarrassed to ask what's my fault." Savannah sneered. "It's that you're selfish." Fiona was not stingy in her accusations. "You're used to having everything done for you. You want to go to school, be my guest. You want an apartment, get an apartment. It's not enough to have one apartment, get another one. You never cared about anyone else." Savannah listened to her sister and wondered, does she really mean it? How could she pretend to be loving and understanding for so many years? The thoughts swirled around in her head. Savannah didn't notice when tears ran down her cheeks. Everything she had believed in, everything she had strived for, was crumbling before her eyes. The people closest to her had betrayed her once again. Savannah had no desire to prove or explain anything. She took a deep breath, wiped away her tears, and said in as calm a tone as she could manage, "I'm sorry, sister, for not living up to your expectations. But mine will stay with me, and I have no claim on yours." With that, Savannah dropped the call. The clock was approaching 6 o'clock. The city was still asleep. There was a ringing silence. Savannah mentally fell into an endless abyss. A pall of light came over her eyes. She wanted to scream, but she had no strength. Tears were streaming down her face, and her heart was beating so hard, as if it wanted to jump out of her chest. Savannah was pulled out of her daze by a phone call. The name John popped up on the screen. Shaking her head to bring herself to her senses, Savannah answered the call. "Good morning, my love." The young man said hello cheerfully. "I hope I didn't wake you up. I have some good news." "Good morning, John." Trying not to show her depressed state, Savannah answered, "I'm awake now." "Did something happen to you?" The young man suspected. "Were you crying?" "No, I'm fine," she lied. "Just a little cold." "What bad timing?" John complained. "I finally settled the matter of the transfer. I start my new assignment in a week. I wanted to see you." "Come, I'd be glad to." "Then I'll pack all my things so I don't have to go back and come to you," said John, "and you don't get discouraged. Drink tea with raspberries." "I'll be as good as new when you get here," Savannah promised. 2 days later, she met John at the train station. The man was glowing with joy. Dropping the suitcase, he ran up to Savannah and took her in his arms and began to twirl her around. "Finally, we are together," he rejoiced. Every day, John brought his beloved breakfast in bed and met her with a hot dinner from work. While Savannah was away from home, he fixed the faucets that had been leaking for a long time, changed the hinges in the kitchen cabinets, hung up her portrait with her grandparents, which had stood on the table leaning against the wall for several years. In short, he did all the manly things. In John's presence, Savannah felt happy and loved. The week flew by unnoticed. On the eve of John's departure, Savannah took a day off. In the morning, the lovers lounged in bed for a long time, and then, while the young man went to the train station to get tickets, the hostess prepared a delicious dinner. Having fortified themselves, they decided to walk around the city. Holding hands like schoolchildren, John and Savannah walked slowly through the park, enjoying the fresh, frosty air. They were warm and cozy with each other. The time flew by. For dinner, John invited Savannah to a restaurant. A glass of wine, light appetizers, romantic entourage, and quiet, peaceful music all helped Savannah to make this evening unforgettable. John took Savannah's hand and looked intently into her eyes. "Will you marry me?" Suddenly he asked, and taking advantage of her confusion, pulled a ring out of his pocket. At that moment, Savannah's heart was ready to jump out of her chest. She had been waiting for a marriage proposal from John for a long time and was ready to say yes, but she could not imagine that this moment would be so exciting for her. Gladly, Savannah replied and extended her hand to the young man. John left for the capital, and Savannah stayed in her city to wait for the transfer to another branch. After seeing her fiancé off, she plunged into her work. While dealing with other people's problems, Savannah forgot about her own. Having firmly decided not to dig into the past and to leave her relationship with her mother and sister as it was, she calmed down and began to focus on her own life. Having accepted the marriage proposal, Savannah asked John to do without lavish celebrations. The bride and groom agreed to get married in one of the capital's registries after the issue of Savannah's move was resolved. By Savannah's time, John promised to settle the issue of renting a place to live. Spring was in full swing. The snow had long since melted, leaving no trace behind. Nature was coming out of its winter hibernation. The riot of colors around created a joyful mood. The birds singing in different voices made my heart flutter. Savannah was waiting for her transfer to the capital, and she was eager to see her beloved. John, as promised, prepared everything for the bride's arrival, rented an apartment for the first time, set up everyday life, studied the real estate market. The long-awaited day had arrived. Savannah gathered all the necessary things for the first time, agreed with a realtor about the sale of their apartments, and went to the new life. All the way there, she thought about the last conversation with her mother and sister. "You are a bad daughter," her mother accused her. "Ungrateful. I gave you life as best I could, took care of you. Yes, you went to live with your grandparents, but that was your decision. I didn't kick you out. It's not my fault you couldn't get along with Jack. I didn't have to be alone for the rest of my life because of you, did I? I was too young when I was widowed. I needed a man. And you know, not everyone would take in a child. But Jack did, and he took you in. And you, kicked him out of the house. You were always trying to get me to be alone. You're selfish. I don't think anyone needs him but you," Savannah said. "Whistle and he'll come running." "You have no right to insult my father." Fiona stood up for him. "I've always loved you and respected you as a big sister. You've been my role model in everything, but I didn't expect an apartment to come between us. And I didn't expect the price of your sisterly love to be an apartment." Savannah retorted. "You're ungrateful." Fiona repeated her mother's accusation. "For you, material things were more important than family ties." "That's not true," Savannah replied. "I haven't stopped loving you. But you, when you learned that there would be no division of my inheritance, quickly abandoned me." Joanna and Fiona spent a long time proving Savannah wrong, trying to press her pity and conscience. But their arguments didn't work on Savannah. After giving them a chance to talk, she left with the words, "I will not be manipulated. But I think the grandparents envisioned this situation, so they disposed of their property this way instead of the other way around. If you can't be happy for me with me, I won't bother your eyes and will leave. I don't want anything from you, but I don't owe you anything either. You have a husband," she turned to her sister, "so earn your own apartment. And if you can't, ask your father for help." At the new place, Savannah quickly settled in. The team was new, young, active. There was a lot of work, but Savannah always got home on time. She gave herself the attitude that family was the most important thing in her life. On the appointed date, the first day of summer, John and Savannah married. As agreed, they didn't invite guests to their first family party, deciding it was for the two of them. They still hadn't heard from Joanna and Fiona, but the realtor found buyers for Savannah's apartments. To solve the issue of the sale, she took 2 weeks of leave without pay and went to her hometown. Having settled all the formalities, Savannah was about to return, but before leaving, she decided to visit her relatives. As she approached her mother's house, she saw her sitting on a bench in the yard. It had only been 6 months since they had last seen each other, but it seemed to Savannah that she had aged a lot in that time. Joanna was sitting alone, staring intently at a single point in front of her. Sadness and longing were printed on her face. The wrinkles that were barely noticeable before had become deep. At the sight of her mother, Savannah's insides tightened. At that moment, she wanted to hug her and feel sorry for her, maybe even apologize for what she had said in haste. On impulse, Savannah rushed to her mother's side, but Jack came out of the driveway. When she saw him, Joanna got up quickly and scampered after him. Savannah stopped. As she looked at her mother and stepfather, she experienced a gamut of feelings: pain from another betrayal, anger, self-pity. Barely holding back tears, Savannah turned and ran back. That's when she heard a familiar voice calling her name. "Savannah, is that you?" The girl stopped and turned her head to see her sister with a bag in her hands. Despite her haggard appearance, she looked better. Pregnancy looked good on her. Waddling from foot to foot like a duck, Fiona approached Savannah. "How long have you been here?" she asked, as if nothing had happened. 2 weeks ago, Savannah answered. "For how long?" "I'm leaving today. I came to take care of some business. And here." Fiona paused, trying to formulate a question. "I wanted to stop by before I left to say goodbye," Savannah explained. "But no one was home," she lied. "You must have missed your mom," Fiona suggested. She was going to. She was silent again, obviously not saying the right thing. "Leave. Is everything okay?" Savannah asked. "Yeah, I'm fine." "Then I'm gonna go," Savannah said. "Would you like to come over for a visit?" Fiona asked in an uncertain tone. "Not tonight. Some other time," Savannah promised and was about to continue on her way, but her sister called out to her again. Savannah turned around and saw Fiona's guilty face. "Savannah," she addressed her sister as she had before. "I'm sorry for what I said to you the other day. You know, hormones. Don't hold it against me. I don't know what came over me. You're right. I had nothing to do with your inheritance. You're the only heir to your dad and his parents. I wasn't so lucky with my father. He never thought about me. He lived his whole life and still does for himself. What did my mom see in him?" "Don't worry." Savannah calmed her down. "I'm not mad at you. I get it. Everyone can make mistakes. The main thing is to realize it in time and repent." Savannah walked over to Fiona and Hunter. As she pressed against her sister, she felt a jolt to her stomach and bounced away. Fiona smiled and placed a hand on her tummy and said, "Well, there goes the niece you've met." The girls laughed. After the conversation with her sister, Savannah felt as if a mountain had fallen from her shoulders. Only one thought kept her mind. Did Mom really get back together with Jack? Had she forgiven him? Savannah didn't dare to ask Fiona about it. She was afraid to break the fragile peace that had formed between them the last time they'd met. "Why do you need this information?" John asked incomprehensively. "If your mom is fine with it, then you shouldn't care. Whatever she is, she's my mother, and I can't live with that monster around her," Savannah justified. "What if he hits her again? But you can't stop your mother from hanging out with him. It's her choice." "You're right," Savannah agreed, sighing heavily. "And then there's your sister. I don't think she'll let her mother get hurt," John said before leaving. Turning the key in the lock, the man kissed his wife on the cheek and disappeared out the door. Savannah thought about it for a while longer, but gradually the daily routine distracted her from the bad thoughts. She plunged headlong into her work. On weekends, the newlyweds traveled from morning to night to view apartments. They decided not to hurry with the choice, especially since John's apartment was not sold. "There was nothing suitable for our money on the secondary market," Savannah said disappointedly, coming back from another viewing. "Why don't we look at new buildings?" John suggested it. "The price is lower." "Yes, but we don't know when the house will be finished. And then there's the renovation." "You need a lot of money for that too," Savannah replied. "It's better to renovate than to redecorate," John said with optimism in his voice. The next weekend, we decided to look at apartments and houses under construction. After waiting for the end of the work week, the couple were going to the construction company when Savannah's phone rang. "Hi, sis," she said cheerfully, answering the phone. But Adam's voice came through the phone. "Savannah, it's not Fiona," he said. "It's Adam." "Did something happen to her?" Savannah was worried. "No, don't worry," her sister's husband reassured her. "I'm calling to tell you that you're an aunt. We had a baby girl. Fiona's asleep, so I thought I'd call you." "Congratulations," Savannah shouted with joy. "Why don't you come visit us?" Adam asked. "I can't yet. I'm swamped at work," Savannah explained. "But I'll try to be here by New Year's Eve, just in time for my niece to grow up and get stronger by Savannah's time." Saying goodbye to her sister's husband, Savannah told John the happy news, but noticed that he reacted too calmly, even indifferently. "I understand that they are strangers to you. If you could at least be happy for me," Savannah said with resentment in her voice. "I'm glad," John replied. "It's just that I think it's time you introduced me to your family. It's not human. We've been married for 3 months, and your mother and sister still don't know." "You're right, but you know how complicated my relationship with my relatives is." Savannah tried to justify herself. "I promised to make it up to them. We'll go to visit them together in the winter." After looking at several apartments in new buildings, the newlyweds chose the one they liked the most. The neighborhood is new, all the necessary infrastructure will be. The yards are arranged for children and adults to relax. Savannah listed the pluses of this object. Even the metro station is planned to open in walking distance. "And a large selection of apartments with different layouts on different floors," added John. "And from the window you can see a small pond. I like everything, and the price is reasonable for us." "Yes, but if my apartment were sold, we could buy a 2-bedroom in this house," John said, frustrated. "The important thing is to start somewhere." Savannah encouraged him. "I have enough money for a 1-bedroom apartment. It's better than renting." "I agree," John replied in the same frustrated tone. "But don't get me wrong. I've never lived off a woman. And now I don't want you to think that I need your apartment." "What are you talking about?" Savannah was indignant. "You and I are husband and wife." "It's not silly," John continued. "It's very important to me." "What are you saying?" If you happen to be the one buying this apartment, then let it be registered in your name. What's more, I'm proposing a prenup." Savannah looked at her husband, trying to understand whether he was serious or joking. But there was not a muscle on John's face. He was determined. "Okay," Savannah agreed, "if you insist." "Yes, I want my woman to have confidence in me at all times." "You are my knight," Savannah said with a smile and hugged her husband. "Congratulations, Savannah," said a representative man in a suit and tie, handing the new keys to the next tenant. "You are now the full owner of a one-bedroom apartment with finishes." "Thank you," Savannah replied, and without hiding her joy, looked at the people standing on the playground, future neighbors. The keys were ceremonially handed over to all the apartment owners present. Then on the same playground, the developer organized a small amateur concert. In the evening, Savannah and John returned home happy and discussed their move to the new apartment. During the conversation, they did not immediately hear the phone ringing from John's jacket pocket, but the caller was persistent. Looking at the screen and seeing an unfamiliar number, John was surprised and answered the call. "Hello. Yes, it's me. I'm selling. I'll be able to drive up next weekend." "Okay, all right." When the call was dropped, John grumbled unhappily. "It's about time." "Did you find a buyer for the apartment?" Savannah guessed. "I think so," John replied. "What am I supposed to do with him now? We could have bought a bigger apartment a month earlier. And now not to sell the new apartment." "Maybe we shouldn't sell your apartment yet," Savannah suggested. "Let it sit. And then we'll spend 6 months looking for a buyer again." "No, as long as there's someone who wants it, we have to go through with it," Savannah replied with a shrug. The next weekend, John went to his town, and Savannah, not knowing what to do, walked from corner to corner. Suddenly, the phone rang. "Hi, sis," said Savannah, answering the phone. "Hi, Savannah," Fiona said without much joy in her voice. "What's up? What are you doing?" "I'm thinking about moving to a new apartment," Savannah answered, and then asked, "Why are you so sad? Did something happen?" "I don't even know where to start," the sister hesitated. "Mom and Dad, well, they're back together. I don't want him to come home. We're too cramped. Dad got a house in the country from his parents, but Mom doesn't want to leave town. Why don't you talk to her?" "No way. Don't involve me in your business. I've already given up my share of the apartment. We'll take it from here." "Savannah, are you sure you won't claim it?" Fiona asked. "I won't," she promised. "Thank you, sis," Fiona exclaimed happily. "You're the best." After settling all the issues in his hometown, John returned home satisfied. "Savannah," he exclaimed from the doorstep, "I propose to buy a plot of land in the suburbs and gradually build a cottage. What do you think about it?" "I think it's a good idea." Surprisingly, such a plot of land was found very quickly. On New Year's Eve, the happy newlyweds were on their way to visit Fiona and Adam. The hospitable hosts were happily unwrapping the gifts brought by their sister and her husband. Savannah was getting to know her niece, and Fiona was jokingly indignant. What a sister! She got married and didn't even tell anyone. When the first passion subsided, Savannah asked, "Where's Mom?" "She moved in with her father," Fiona replied dryly. The older sister didn't pursue the subject. The New Year's Eve party turned out to be fun. Adam and John, despite the age difference, had quickly found common ground. On the eve of homecoming, Savannah asked her sister, "Have you seen your mom lately?" "Not since she moved away," Fiona replied and added, "If she hasn't called, then she's doing well." Savannah was a little surprised by her sister's answer, but she remained silent. The day the guests left, Fiona received a call from her mother. "Daughter, can I come and see you?" she asked, swallowing her tears. "What happened?" "Father, I guess I was wrong to contact him again." "Of course you can come," Fiona said in a disgruntled tone, "but your former room is now our bedroom." "Thank you, Fiona," said the mother, ignoring the warning. "I'm already at the house. I'll be right there." A minute later, the doorbell rang. On the threshold stood the mother. When she saw her eldest daughter, she fidgeted and said hello, fixing with her hand her hair, which was dislodged from under the cap, thus covering her eye. Savannah noticed a bruise on her mother's face that was carefully covered with foundation. "Happy holidays, Mom," Savannah said, hesitating to go up to her and give her a hug. "I'd like you to meet my mom. This is my husband, John, and this is my mom." "Joanna," the woman introduced herself and extended her hand to her son-in-law. "I didn't expect you to marry such a handsome man." She turned to her daughter. "Well, why not? You have a beautiful daughter. She's smart. She's beautiful. Yes, she got that from me. Joanna said coquettishly. Why are we standing on the doorstep? Why don't we sit down and celebrate? We should get back, Savannah said. It was nice to see you. Come visit, Fiona said. You too, John said. We will, Fiona promised. Savannah's heart was raw after seeing her mother. She was silent the whole way. Understanding his wife's mood, John did not bother her. Later, from a phone conversation with her sister, Savannah learned that having contacted with her father, Joanna was addicted to alcohol. And when they get drunk, they start to find out the relationship, complained Fiona. Swearing turns into fights. That's why I didn't want Dad to move back in with us. Why didn't you tell me this before? Savannah asked. What difference would it have made? You already helped Mom out once. Where's the gratitude? She blamed you even more for ruining her family. Savannah was hurt to hear those words, but she was used to her mother's attitude. I persuaded her to stay, but she decided to go back to her father, Fiona continued. And when I forbade him to cross the threshold of our house, she, in solidarity with him, signed over the apartment to me and slammed the door loudly. As you can see, their relationship lasted a little over a month. Is she staying with you now? Savannah asked. No. A week after you left, her father came to get her and persuaded her to move back in with him. I don't understand her, Savannah said with genuine regret. Why would she be so nervous in her old age? Maybe she needs medical attention. I don't think so. I don't think she want to go to therapy. It's been 5 years. The sisters still called each other, occasionally visiting. John and Savannah gradually built a house, a bathhouse, and a gazebo of their country estate. Our country house is not for work, but for relaxation, Savannah said. And indeed, on every holiday and just on weekends they often went out of town, inviting friends to visit. One day after a phone conversation with his mother, John asked his wife, Savannah, would you mind if I moved my parents to our country house? They're in poor health. They'll be closer to us. Savannah had a great relationship with her mother-in-law and father-in-law, so she immediately agreed to her husband's proposal. On the next weekend, the couple went to John's parents and offered them to move into their house. But what about our apartment? Hesitated mother. And what will happen to her? John asked. Let it stand. She does not ask for bread. After a little thought, the parents agreed. Soon they were living at their son and daughter-in-law's cottage and were happy that now they could spend more time in the fresh air. Savannah was pleased to see the old people happy. She liked to keep secrets with her mother-in-law, just as she had done with her grandmother when she was a child. John's mother was an intelligent woman and tried to stay out of their lives, but there was one question she couldn't stop asking. Savannah, why haven't you and John had children yet? She asked her one day. I would love to have grandchildren in my old age. It was a depressing question. For many years, she and her husband had dreamed of children, had been examined by various doctors, had taken medications prescribed by them, but all in vain. They all said the same thing. You're both healthy. Maybe there's an incompatibility between you. And no one could tell me what to do about the incompatibility. Savannah had given up hope of becoming a mother. Once in a conversation with her husband, she even suggested that he break up with her and find another woman who could give birth to an heir. But John was outraged when he heard about it. Never, do you hear me? Don't ever suggest that I break up with you. I love you and I wouldn't trade you for any other woman. If God doesn't give us children, then we'll live together and enjoy each other's company. Savannah and John never returned to the subject again. They seemed resigned to their fate. But when Savannah heard the question of children from others, she felt uneasy. Fiona and Adam had another daughter. They were happily married, but Fiona had little contact with her mother. Joanna, after burying Jack, who was stabbed to death by a neighbor in a drunken brawl, stayed to live in his house. She'd asked to stay with his youngest daughter, but Fiona didn't want to take in a mother. I don't think she'd be a good example for her granddaughters. She explained her decision. I don't want any drunkenness here. Savannah and her husband visited Joanna several times, offering to help fix up the house, which was almost falling apart. But her mother wouldn't accept any help from her eldest daughter. She abandoned us years ago. She's gone to her capital city with all her money. Go there, she shouted at her. I don't want anything more from you. When I asked you, you didn't want to share. Now get out of here. Forget you have a mother. You're ungrateful. I raised you alone, without a father, and you. You ruined my family. You kicked out my husband. You abandoned Fiona. I didn't abandon anyone. Savannah tried to justify herself to her mother. You're the one who threw me out of your life like an unwanted kitten. After my grandparents died, I was just floundering on my own. Well, keep on floundering. Don't mess with me. I've got someone to take care of me. Fiona always loved me, unlike you. That's why you're living here, in this shack, Savannah said with resentment. It's none of your business. I can live wherever I want. Get out of my house, shouted Joanna after her fleeing daughter. Having witnessed the last scandal, John forbade Savannah to visit her mother, and Savannah herself had lost her last desire to visit her. 6 months after moving to the country house of his son died John's father. The mother was very worried, but tried to hold on. After consulting, the couple moved her to their apartment. Cramped, but no offense, said John. Don't be so pompous, his wife said. We have a one-room apartment, but it's big. Now that I've settled in, said her mother, why should our apartment be idle? Sell it, John, and exchange yours for a 2- or 3-room apartment. A year later, the couple celebrated a housewarming party in a spacious one-bedroom apartment. The house was full of guests that day. Fiona and Adam and their daughters came to congratulate their relatives. Friends brought a lot of gifts. The holiday was a success. Savannah and her mother-in-law set a gorgeous table. Everyone was satisfied. In the evening, after seeing his friends off, John took his relatives to the country house. They expressed a desire to stay a few days with him. Savannah and her mother-in-law were clearing the table when she felt sick. John's terrified mother called an ambulance and called her son. By the time he returned, a doctor was already sitting beside Savannah. When she saw John, she said hello and with a smile. Congratulations, co-worker. You're going to be a daddy soon. And you, mommy, need to take care of yourself. She turned to Savannah. In the coming months, you should not be overexcited or overstressed.
Thank you for watching this video to the end. Subscribe to the channel. Like it, write comments if you like the story, and see you on the channel.